Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Santa Rosa City Council meeting of August 8th, 2017. Thank you for your patience. We apologize for being late today. Ms. Gomez, could you announce the roll, please?
Let the record show that all council members are present.
We have, can we have a report on, sorry, the city attorney isn't here yet. We'll come back to that. We have no proclamations or presentations. Staff briefings, Mr. McGlynn.
Item 7.1, Quarterly Capital Improvement Programs Project Update, April to June 2017. Brad Hoffman, Supervising Land Surveyor, presenting.
Good afternoon, Mayor Corsi, members of council. I'm Brad Hoffman, land surveyor in Transportation and Public Works. I'm here today to give you the quarterly report for CIP projects for the fourth quarter of 2016 and 17. I'll first give you the expenditure summary, a few words about the role of the survey team, following with some project updates, and give you more information on where to obtain more information on our city's website. As the slide shows, for this quarter, a total of $9.3 million was expended among the various categories. Parks, facilities, and local sewer and water share about half of the total in nearly equal amounts. The remaining categories vary, as is typical for this report. A little about the survey team. Typically, these quarterly reports are presented by one of the four supervising engineers in capital projects engineering who give the updates on their own team's current and future work. But as surveyors, we're involved with most, if not all, of the projects in the division. We provide the foundation for each project by mapping for the preliminary engineering and estimating, land acquisition, and the final design of the project. The same mapping supplies framework that provide control for the contractor and the city engineers to use to build and inspect the project. We also support project engineers by providing legal descriptions and plats for right-of-way acquisitions. This slide is an example of a deliverable we produce. We recently mapped the city's newly acquired property on Lakeville Highway that will be used to spread biosolids. This map will be used for future planning and as a basis for any improvements that are planned. And one other important role, in addition to leading the survey team, I also have the ongoing responsibility of signing and reviewing parcel maps, subdivision maps for planning and economic development. So some projects of note from the CIP teams that are recently completed or are now in construction. The downtown Santa Rosa streetscape is completed. This project involved two locations, one at 3rd between Morgan and B Street, that made pedestrian improvements, including lighting, street trees, bike lanes, and pedestrian delineation. The second location at Santa Rosa Avenue and Mill Streets installed a new traffic signal, pedestrian ramps, and made some storm drain improvements. Foley Avenue sewer improvements is also completed. This project replaced existing 6-inch sanitary sewer in Foley Avenue with an 8-inch main and redirected flows from the old trunk to Cleveland Avenue, Old Town Trunk to Cleveland. It included water service improvements and installing 2 commercial fire hydrants. And after the underground work was completed, the road was reconstructed. Accessibility alterations at Skyhawk Park completed, and this project removed and reconstructed existing pathways to maintain compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act. It provided an accessible route to the park playground and soccer fields using the footprint of the existing pathways. The Neighborhood Streets Initiative and Roseland Streets Overlay has now begun. It will rehabilitate an overall length of approximately 2.3 miles of selected city streets. Proposed improvements vary between roadway reconstruction and simple overlay. A total of 73 curb ramps within the project limits will be upgraded to current ADA standards. And all existing striping will be reinstalled after the streets are resurfaced. The annual Slurry Seal 2017 is underway, and it applies slurry seal to various primarily residential streets. The streets are slurried by applying a thin 1/4-inch coat of liquid asphalt and sand. This is going to restore the pavement's ability to prevent water intrusion, corrects minor cracking, and provides skid resistance. And finally, the Mohawk Lift Station and Force Main Realignment Phase 2. This is a $2.3 million project that replaces antiquated sewer and water mains in Yuma, Sioux, and Mohawk streets. It'll remove approximately 70 homes from the Mohawk Lift Station sewer shed. All streets will be reconstructed. In addition, the lift station itself will be upgraded to replace the wet well and to install newer, more efficient pumps. And that concludes the report. You can get more information from our website at srcity.org/CIP. If there's any questions, I'll try to answer.
Thank you. Council, questions on this item? Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. It's great to see some of this work happening and about to happen. Streets are looking good around downtown, and I do want to say that the 3rd Street, the work on 3rd Street underneath the mall is appreciated.
Yeah, it turned out nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. City Attorney, we skipped the report on the closed session while you were absent.
I apologize for the delay in getting back over. In terms of closed session, item 2.1, council received an update on existing litigation. No action was taken. Item 2.2, council discussed anticipated litigation and gave direction to staff.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 8.1. City Manager McGlynn, do you have any report?
Yes, I do. As you know, Council, over the weekend, the police department responded to a call regarding a person acting erratically in a home located in the 2400 block of West Steel Lane. During that call, a gentleman who has been identified as 35-year-old Pablo Garcia was fatally shot. The Santa Rosa Police Department, in accordance with the Sonoma County Law Enforcement Employee-Involved Fatal Incident Protocol, contacted the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office requesting their independent investigation of the incident. The Sonoma County Sheriff's Office has been designated as the lead investigating agency. The investigation is being supplemented with investigative resources from the Petaluma Police Department, Rohnert Park Department of Public Safety, and the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office. The event was captured on the officers' body-worn cameras, and those videos are assisting in the investigation. In accordance with the Santa Rosa Police Department's policies and procedures, the officers involved have been placed on paid administrative leave. The independent police auditor has been notified about the shooting. Per the protocol, our police department has issued the initial press release. All other media releases for the next several days will come from the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. This is a tragic event, and our hearts go out to Mr. Garcia's family, the officers involved and their families, and the community in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGlynn. I'm sure we'd all like to convey our condolences and concerns to all the parties involved in this unfortunate incident. Ms. City Attorney, 8.1.
8.1, this is a quarterly report of settlements and active litigation. Unfortunately, due to an inadvertent clerical error, what was uploaded into the agenda was the report from the winter rather than the current report. So I'll withdraw the item for tonight, and we will place it back on the calendar for next week with the correct litigation report.
Thank you. Are there any statements of abstention tonight from council members? Seeing none, we'll move on to mayor and council members' reports. Who would like to begin? Mr. Oliveros.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to report that I will be appointing Dulio Meza to the Community Advisory Board representing the Southeast Quadrant.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick announcement that the Sonoma Clean Power Drive Evergreen program actually officially launched and opened today for round 2. It is an incentive-based program for Sonoma Clean Power customers to help get you into electric vehicles, and also upgrade your electric charging stations at businesses and at homes. It is on the Sonoma Clean Power website, and I have more details if you need them. Feel free to see me after.
Thank you. Mr. Sweathill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Attended a variety of different items or events this past week, most notably the Ironman in downtown Santa Rosa. And I just want to compliment the city manager and staff. I know what goes on to make an event like that successful. And I was particularly impressed that you had city staff available in real time to respond to some of the traffic complaints that were received. And I'm very confident that a lot of that information coming back will be applied to next year's both 70.3 and the full Ironman. But it was great to be downtown Santa Rosa and watching some tremendous athletes and the families supporting those athletes in our downtown. Wonderful event. And then on Thursday the 3rd, I was able to participate in a fundraiser for the Palms Inn event where Congressman Thompson and State Senator McGuire were supporting a lot of the community members who called the Palms Inn homes, and a lot of local elected officials, and some, including up here on the dais, helped make that a very successful event. And some of us attended the League of California Cities North Bay Division meeting in Vallejo, and we learned and heard a little bit from those in Vallejo how they are dealing with some of their medicinal marijuana challenges, which was very helpful. And then also on Monday, I attended 2 meetings, the Water Advisory Council, where we received several updates on the Russian River biological opinion, the Potter Valley project relicensing process, and talk about some federal, state, and local bureaucracy, about a 5-year process. Very interesting. And also several different, there's a water bond coalition because there's several different pieces of legislation that includes funding for both water projects and recreation and parks projects. So it was very encouraging to hear a number of our local officials are monitoring that and trying to make sure that the appropriate amounts of funding come to our local jurisdictions. And then I'm sure the mayor will be reporting out on the Financing for Infrastructure and Housing Ad Hoc Committee. And again, I'd like to compliment the city manager, city staff did a wonderful job updating us on some of the financing and infrastructure needs for the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Collins?
Were you planning on doing the report out on the LAFCO meeting?
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I just, I attended the meeting of LAFCO with the vote to, the unanimous vote to move forward with the annexation of Roseland at that, I think the phrase was obscure agency. And it was a pleasure to see the support for that annexation going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Over the last few months, I've had the opportunity to be involved with folks who are operating, who work for county counsel's office, different departments within the county, as well as organized advocates within the community that have come together to provide some sense of security, or at least to the best of their ability, for immigrant families living within Santa Rosa. And they've come up with a fund that they're now calling the Sonoma County Secure Families Fund. And as I understand it, the primary objective of this fund is to raise about $2 million in order to provide for any potential legal defense in the event of a raid or somebody being deported, among other important things that helps undocumented immigrants understand their rights when you can be in kind of a fear-based society, which I think for many in that community would argue right now is the case and is the reality they live within. There can be increased instances of exploitation of those populations. So the Sonoma County Secure Families Fund is being established to guard against those occurrences and to protect these people. The folks within the county are going to be going around to different jurisdictions throughout the county and the incorporated cities to ask for financial support in order to help provide that legal defense. The amount is unknown. It can be deliberated upon. I know that when we passed our Indivisible Cities Ordinance months ago, we included the opportunity for partnerships with jurisdictional partners in the resolution. But what I'm presenting here is I was asked to come to this body and ask this council to consider, put something on the agenda to consider making a contribution to the Sonoma County Secure Families Fund. And so that is a request for a second for the agenda.
Second. So we'll talk about that at a future council meeting. Is that it? Okay, it's been a couple weeks since our last meeting, so there's been a few things going on in the community. I wanted to mention on July 19th, I attended the dedication of a Habitat for Humanity project on West Steel Lane. Got to meet the Dodson family, a family, I believe they have 6 kids who were having a lot of trouble finding a house until they became involved with Habitat for Humanity and put a lot of sweat equity into rehabilitating an old house that was getting fairly derelict out in that neighborhood. There will also be 3 other houses on that property to create a little village, and it was great to take part in that on behalf of the city. We also had city staff on hand. As Ms. Combs mentioned, last Wednesday, LAFCO unanimously approved the city's request for annexation of the Roseland neighborhood and 5 other isolated county islands that exist within the boundaries of Santa Rosa. This is a big step. It doesn't complete the process, but it moves it forward quite a bit, and enjoyed being part of that historic occasion. And Councilmember Schwedhelm mentioned our meeting yesterday of the Financing for Infrastructure and Housing Subcommittee. This is an ad hoc subcommittee of the council looking at some of the unmet needs around the city for both housing and city infrastructure. Everything from the pipes in the ground to the pavement on the streets to the roofs over our heads. And we're looking at what those needs are and how we might generate some revenue to meet those needs going into future decades. That committee will continue to meet. Finally tonight, I am reappointing our ad hoc committee that is taking a look at our performance reviews for the council's 2 employees. And this committee met a couple times over the winter It will continue to meet as those performance reviews come due. And the ad hoc committee is myself, Council Member Schwedhelm, and Vice Mayor Tibbetts. And with that, we will move on to the minutes of July 11th. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? I'll show those as accepted. Mr. McGlynn, the consent calendar.
Item 12.1, resolution, appropriation of Measure M funds for the Fulton Road improvements between Guerneville Road and Piner Road. Item 12.2, resolution, amended cooperative agreement with the Sonoma County Transportation Authority for Fulton Road improvements. Item 12.3, resolution, sole source contract for parking access and revenue control software, credit card processing, and repair service with, I hope I say this right, Scheit and Bachman USA Incorporated. Item 12.4, resolution, parking user fees effective dates. Item 12.5, resolution, agreement with Packet Fusion Incorporated. Item 12.6, resolution, assessment lien against the real property located at 1358 Page Court, Santa Rosa, California, 95407.
Thank you. Council, are there questions on any of these items? I do have one card. Mr. Canini.
Mayor, Council, all of the money from the parking meters on all of the public streets, all of that money goes to the parking district. Those are public streets, yet they get all of the money. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't know that, maybe that's something that you might want to review. The parking garages. Greyhound Bus has been invited and is using the transit mall, which is contiguous to a parking garage. Greyhound Bus pays to use the transit mall. None of that money, zip, zero, nada, null, niente, goes to City Bus, not one penny. That money goes to the parking district. Doesn't seem fair to me. It seems fair to you. They get a use of a bus bay, and all the money goes to the parking district. The parking district gets the use of a table in there to sell. Greyhound gets the use of a table in the garage to sell tickets, but all the money goes to the parking district. City Bus has been paying the parking garage to park their van there. They shuttle drivers between Stony Point and the transit mall. And they have a van, which they park at that garage. And they have to pay the parking district to park the garage. That's something I think should be reviewed. Too many people have their hands too deep in City Bus's pocket. And I do understand that some money was put in the City Bus, but my understanding was that was a loan. It was to cover a shortfall that was discovered. It's not really funding, it's just a loan. So some people try to claim credit for putting public funds into the parking district. Other jurisdictions do. I think you should too, because good public transit lowers the cost of living. This is well known. I think a bus pass is, I think it's something like $30 a month. Typical car costs about more than $6,000 a year. 30 a month times 12 is a lot less than $6,000. And that's just the operating cost of the car. People would run some numbers. There's a great savings to be had with City Bus. And it was a very good service until just recently, when it was really, really damaged by that reimagining, which I am. Thank you.
Mr. Tibbetts.
I move item 12.1, 12.2, 12.3, 12.4, 12.5, and 12.6 on the consent calendar and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Councilor Rhodes. Consent calendar passes with 7 ayes. Not quite 5 o'clock yet, so we'll go on to item 14.1.
Item 14.1, report amendment to the Measure O implementation plan for all programs in fiscal year 2017-18 budget amendment. Deborah Lochner, Chief Financial Officer, presenting.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. So today we are revisiting an item that we discussed during the budget deliberations to talk once again about an amendment to the Measure O implementation plan. The Measure O implementation plan was created in 2004. It outlines the program funding for the 3 programs that are funded through Measure O. The format of the plan changed in 2015, where we looked out and did a plan that projected out to the end of the measure. It, at that time, was a 10-year plan. It's a few years less at this point. That forecasts the amounts out to the 24-25 fiscal year. Again, those amounts are forecasted, so each year we do come forward with a plan to change the implementation plan so that the dollars match the actual cost, primarily for salaries and benefits, because while we project those costs, those are projections. When we actually have the accurate costs, we do ask to update to those. A plan change does require 6 members of the council to vote yes. So what we are proposing is to change the expenditure for all programs to reflect the current forecasts. And then in addition to that, we're requesting the extension of one position. It's a limited term position that was due to expire on December 31st. We're requesting that that be extended for the remaining 6 months of the fiscal year at a cost of just under $40,000. The Measure O budget for the Violence Prevention Partnership or the Gang Prevention Intervention programs per the ordinance does have funding available to handle the additional expenditure. So all the departments involved are recommending that the council make this adjustment to the implementation plan and do an amendment to the budget so that the budget for Measure O matches the implementation plan that reflects the projected numbers for fiscal year 17-18. And with that, we'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions, council? Do we have any cards on this, Ms. Gomez? Thank you very much. Mr. Rogers.
I will move the resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa amending the transaction and use tax implementation plan for police, fire, and gang prevention and intervention services and amend the fiscal year 2017-2018 adopted budget.
Second. Your votes, council. And that has 7 ayes. Thank you. We'll move on to public comment for items not on the agenda. Start with Mr. Canini. He'll be followed by David Paul.
Mayor, council members. Mayor, council members. There was a very interesting report recently about the loss of jobs, loss of working class jobs and middle class jobs. These jobs are lost to slave labor, prison labor, here in these United States. I'm not talking about prisoners overseas, slaves overseas, slaves here in the U.S. Our government, state governments, let Huge corporations, highly profitable, well-known corporations, employ prisoners for pennies. And that's where a lot of our jobs are going. The county even uses prison labor. The county of Sonoma releases prisoners to work in the field. I've worked with them in the field. These people are considered slaves by law. I'd like to read to you, because sometimes people misunderstand the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to this jurisdiction. This was reviewed recently by the extreme Supremes. Recently, if you have a gray beard, within the last 30 years. And they affirmed, or upheld, or held, whatever they do now, that yes, prisoners are slaves, here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. There's a great incentive for corporate America, and if you check this on the website, there's some big names there, to increase the slave population in our prisons. They get them for pennies. And they're probably exempt from Obamacare laws. Don't know if that's for sure. But this is something I think we certainly should be aware of. Going on right here, and it's going on in this county. County prisoners are let out. Have a nice day. Thank you.
David Paul will be followed by Lynn Hughes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
One sec. Wait until that red light. Now.
Good afternoon. Thanks for letting us talk. We come from the Red Hawk area out near Skyhawk and Rincon Valley, and we were concerned that a home had sold for a significant amount over the asking price, and so we tried to find out why that happened, since everybody else was selling for below asking price. And we found out that the North Bay Regional Center and a company out of San Francisco had conspired to purchase that single-family residence at 5679 Queen Anne Drive and proposed to convert it to a commercial daycare facility to house only 4 duly diagnosed patients from the Sonoma Development Center. We've provided a little printout for you, but in summary, our investigation showed that there was a considerable opportunity for financial improprieties as well as process improprieties, and we told the Department of Developmental Services, Nancy Bargman, and she decided that she was going to conduct an investigation of every single one of the 17 points that we had made in our previous email to her. Our request for you today is to direct staff and the Planning Commission to hold off on approving any plan review or approval or any permits on construction for this site until those investigations are completed. We would hate to see the city of Santa Rosa involved in something that's been turned into a major investigation. It turns out that the home was purchased for $1,125,000. It turns out that $350,000 is going to be required to renovate that house, and that $600,000 of taxpayer money was used in order to acquire that house for a private nonprofit agency. We believe that there's sufficient probable cause to ask the staff to just slow down until those financial and process investigations are complete. This enterprise generates, this nonprofit enterprise, based on the pro forma calculations we've had checked with other people here, generates about $280,000 of free cash per year for every single home that's been purchased by Brilliant Corners. There are 10 of them and more to come, and we think we need to stop it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Hughes, followed by Bob Hughes.
Good evening. My name's Lynn Hughes, and my husband and myself, many years ago now, subdivided Red Tail Estates into 16 half-acre lots. It was a single family, half acres. Some of the money we had to pay to the city went to affordable housing. And we've lived in this East Lake, Queen Anne Victorian for 40 years, raised our family here. It's a two-story, which we find out they're not allowed to have two stories next to them. But our home, I could say, is our castle. I mean, we just adore it. And when we welcomed all our new neighbors in with the little children and the new schools, and we thought that was wonderful. And now we find out that a facility housing people that will never perhaps be sane, it will not be a single-family home anymore. I tried to look into the Reagan, Ronald Reagan. We keep hearing Ronald Reagan sent the mentally ill people out on the streets. I don't think his intent was to have 4 people in a luxurious $1.125 million home with round-the-clock care, and the caregivers only being paid maybe $12 an hour. I looked back into an article out of the New York Times, and it said the policy that led to the release of most of the nation's mentally ill patients from the hospital or community is now widely regarded as a major failure. Sweeping critics of the policy, notably the recent report of the American Psychiatric Association, have spread the blame everywhere, faulting politicians, civil libertarians, lawyers, and psychiatrists. It goes on to say the records show that the politicians were dogged by the image of financial problems posed by the state hospitals, and that the scientific and medical establishment sold Congress and the state legislators a quick fix for a complicated problem that was brought sight unseen. In California, Dr. Robert H. Felix, who was then director of the National Institute of Mental Health and a major figure in the shift to community centers, says now on reflection, many of those patients who left the state hospitals never should have done so. We psychiatrists saw too much of an old snake pit, saw too many people who shouldn't have been there, and we overreacted. The result is not what we intended, and perhaps we didn't ask the questions that should have been asked when developing a new concept. But psychiatrists are human too, and we tried our damnedest. Dr. John A. Talbot, president of the American Psychiatric Association, said the psychiatrists involved in the policy making at the time certainly oversold community treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob Hughes, and he'll be followed by Steve McCullough.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Bob Hughes. When I went to school, we learned that the purpose of government, the main purpose of government, is to provide for the safety of those governed. And in this issue here, I don't think that anyone could find a less safe property for disabled people than this 5679 Queen Anne Drive. There's a long drop off the deck in the back into a drainage easement. And there's another 6 to 8 foot drop from a gravel parking area into the same drainage easement. Also, there's no sidewalk from from along Queen Anne Drive to Melita Road, fronting this property. It is just not safe for the people coming there. One of the things that we mentioned, we had some concerns with the way, and we don't expect you to deal with this, we had some concerns with the way North Bay purchased the property or organized the purchase of the property. It was not any way at all transparent. When we asked about it, they said, well, we want to put people in, disabled folks, in an area where they could utilize what's in the area if they wanted to go. And this is a quote. They wanted to hike in the park. They could leave and go hike in the park. If they wanted to go downtown, they could go downtown. And nobody has a problem with that. We all are very sympathetic to the disabled community. However, after we made our presentation to them, we found out now the population that's coming there has been changed to people with behavioral issues. Issues like hurting themselves, outbursts, and less than social acceptable conduct. Now, in my experience, people that have behavioral issues many times need medication to keep those issues under control. I know people that are like that, and through no fault of their own. However, we also learned that they need a special permit if they're going to dispense. First, they told us they were not going to dispense prescription drugs there. Then when the population changed, I think they may have to, but we heard that the city has to issue a special permit to anyone issuing prescription drugs. Thank you.
Steve McCullough, followed by Joanne Albers.
Steve's not here. Oh, excuse me, maybe he is.
Good afternoon. Steve McCullough, resident of Santa Rosa for 34 years and project manager with Oakmont Senior Living. Most of you know us. We built Verena, the Fountain Grove Lodge, Villa Capri, and the Terraces, over 340 senior housing units with at 100% capacity with long waiting lists. We're building Sendero. It's the old driving range on Highway 12. We've got 197 townhouses under construction. We're building Canyon Oaks. We've got 96 apartments in Fountain Grove under construction. We've got applications in for Emerald Isle, 49 senior care units in Fountain Grove. We've also got our application in for El Noca, 676 units of continuing care retirement community. And we're also working on the Sinead campus, 400 to 800 units in the development stage, which will include over 25% of very low income affordable units, including homeless veterans units. We'll pay over $3 million, we'll pay over $12 million in fees to the city over the next 12 to 18 months, and that's not including El Noca or Sinead. We've survived the recession. We build what we say we're going to build. We're arguably one of your biggest customers. We're ready and willing to help resolve the housing crisis. So why am I here? It's about your planning staff and your direction to staff. I keep hearing how customer service is important to you. I'm here to tell you, your customer service is coming up short, very short. You need to know that in order to solve the problem. Your planning department is understaffed and swamped. They're overwhelmed. I speak from experience. I'm dealing with them. And they're very good. I personally get to work with Bill Rose, Patrick Streeter, and Andy Gustafson. They're very good planners. I take that back. They're excellent planners. but they need help. You've directed them to give the highest priority to affordable housing and to new housing, which we agree with. Unfortunately, I've been told senior care housing is not a priority. Well, it should be. Senior care is housing for the elderly, and it should be a top priority. There's no more compelling need in our community than to plan for the future of our seniors. And that means making senior care housing a priority. Can I have a few more seconds?
You need to wrap it up pretty quickly.
Okay, I'll bring it. When seniors move into a care facility, it allows them to sell or rent their house to younger generations, which helps solving the housing crisis. What can you do? You can beef up the planning staff with qualified planners to improve the efficiency of your approval process, and you can add senior housing to your list of top priorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanne Albers.
Good evening. I am here speaking related somewhat to his issue of housing. I'm talking about the house that was purchased in my neighborhood that is going to be turned into a dwelling for 4 patients coming out of the care facility, the Sonoma Care Facility. We're concerned as neighbors about the safety issues that, as other people have addressed, and that the house is really not suitable for their care. We're also concerned about the use of taxpayer money. Requiring the enterprise to pay Santa Rosa business taxes would generate over $700,000 of income. On the $700,000 income they will reap from that house that they're using. We're also asking Sonoma County to require this commercial enterprise to pay property taxes rather than have that money go to Brilliant Corners, which is the entity operating this scam of buying houses and turning them into really poorly selected houses and poorly designed for this use. In addition to paying $1 million for it, they're paying another $300,000 to rehab the house for 4 individuals, which seems like a tremendous waste of taxpayer money. So we're concerned about it, both for the safety issues, the waste of taxpayer money, and the inappropriateness of this whole business operation and how it is lining their pockets and eliminating that funding from the city coffers. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Cherneff. He'll be followed by Dwayne DeWitt.
Well, good afternoon. It's a beautiful day out there, and so I'm going to hit 2 or 3 topics. I'm going to start off with the fact that worldwide, a minimum of 2/3 of all psychiatrists are actively involved in MKUltra programs. And of course, our government acknowledges they no longer exist, which is why people concerned with this topic and with developmentally troubled people might want to listen to her Matrix of Perception Revolution radio show tomorrow night from 5 to 7, where this topic will be expounded upon. So, you know, these psychiatrists now have a DSM-5 with over 1,000 diagnoses, which requires that Big Pharma drug each one of these people. That's part of the deal. Currently, 25% of all college students have been diagnosed and dosed. So better than watching TV propaganda and commercials, check out the Revolution Radio Show with Monique Lassan tomorrow. And I was listening to about all the money spent on like gang prevention. I mean, there's so many gangs in California. We got the gangs of law enforcement. There's 90,000 of them. But the good news is 95% of them are trying to do the best job they can. Then we got 255,000 state-sanctioned thieves called bar lawyers, where 95% of them should probably be in jail. So there's also a lot of other gangs, and of course the #1 gang in California is the Charles Schultz gang, the #1 gang, of course. So here I got a statement and a request to command the demand of veterans of Special Forces, Semper Fi, give me your ear in action. Spirit tells me that the missing girl child, Pearl Pinson, is in Sonoma County, somewhere underground. The last time they saw the vehicle she was in Jenner. 2 hours later, the man who stole her was shot and killed, so he could not reveal who he sold her to. She has green eyes, which is highly prized by the Yakuza and the Tong, both which abide in these counties. Now, I always liked Steven Seagal. And he just did a movie called Absolution, in which in the beginning he's thinking out loud, he's been a very bad man for so very long, and I want to do something good before I die for someone that no one else can help. There are men with such skills that also abide in these counties. Bring Pearl Pinson home. Contact Monique Lassan if the best you can do is to provide information and you don't want to be known. Get a third party to contact Monique Lassan, private investigator, with the information. She is either in this county or there's people in this county that know exactly where she is and how she was traveled out from this area. And so that is my request, my command, my demand of those who have that ability to do something on behalf of somebody for no other reason except for that needs to be done. And lastly, I second Professor Canini's statements about slaves. Thank you for your time.
Dwayne DeWitt.
Thank you, sir. I was going to use the overhead projector. Thank you. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. And over in Roseland, many more homeless people are appearing. People that I've seen on the eastern side of town are now migrating to the western side. Some of them are staying on city-owned properties. I go in and try to keep it clean. And I got to thinking that after last year's worst winter that we had in my whole lifetime, it'll probably be another wet winter this year. And we should be looking at some quick and inexpensive ways to shelter folks. It's really great to hear all the people that want to help us veterans. It's amazing how many people now are like, yeah, we're going to house the veterans. But that's 5 years down the road as they build and they spend their money and they do what they do. In the military, they just quickly put you in something like this. Raining outside, things are bad, boom, covered for tonight. Shelter from the storm tonight. That's the way to do things. So I got to thinking, you folks would be like, well, no, man, that's too industrial. It doesn't look good, and we got to do it a different way. So how about this? This here is a nice little approach. 10 foot by 12 foot, 120 square feet of greenhouse. People could be in there. They'd be dry. They could put up shades. Here's another little thing that's going on out there that would be inexpensive, and I think it could be helpful. There's a 10 by 17 foot portable garage. It's 170 square feet. That's dry. People let their cars sleep there. People could sleep there too. Then here's one. This is another little adventure, 10 by 10. It's 7 feet tall, so a big person could be in there. And I know if that's too much money, that $139, they got these deals. 10 by 20 for $100. And veterans would stay in those. They wouldn't be too proud to beg, folks. If it's raining outside and you're stuck in a wet sleeping bag, you will want to be sheltered from the storm. And this is how you could do it. So there's a store here in town. It gets most of their stuff from communist China, but what the hey? We're all helping out humanity now. So look at all those different ways to cover your car. You could cover people also like that, very cheaply and very quickly. So when it starts raining really hard, and you're thinking, wow, I'd like to help people, just give them a dry spot. Let them stay dry, their feet stay dry, a place to sleep dry. And it's not going to be at the Sam Jones Center, which is already way overpacked, far more than the capacity that we were told in the Southwest it would hold. But I'm glad you're trying to make some efforts. Just keep this in mind. For $100,000, you could take care of all kinds of folks, far more than a tiny home. I'll set this off. And I'll be out before the 3 minutes. Thank you so much for your time.
That's all the cards I have. We'll move on to item 14.2. Mr.
Item 14.2, report quality of life ordinances enforcement. Sue Gallagher, City Attorney, presenting.
Sue Gallagher, City Attorney, and I also have with me Captain Ray Navarro and Carmelita Howard from Code Enforcement. We came to you last May and talked about our quality of life ordinances and let you know that we were exploring some options for increasing our ability to enforce our codes. When we talk about quality of life ordinances, we're generally looking at a group of ordinances that are designed to preserve quality of life in Santa Rosa. As I think I said in May, I like to think of all of our city ordinances as designed to preserve the quality of life in the city. But this tends to be a term of art that's used across a number of different jurisdictions. So the quality of life ordinances would include things like weed and rubbish abatement, noise limitations, restrictions of alcohol consumption in public urination and defecation, graffiti, obstruction of streets and sidewalks, aggressive panhandling, camping on public and private property, and others. Our city code authorizes enforcement of these and indeed a wide range of ordinances through a misdemeanor enforcement. And in general, unless otherwise provided, all of our code violations are considered misdemeanors. There are a few that are by code considered infractions, at least at the first instance. The code, though, gives the city attorney discretion to prosecute these as either misdemeanors or infractions. And it also gives the city attorney discretion to pursue code violations through administrative or civil proceedings. And we do work very closely with our code enforcement division when in doing that. I let you know last May, but just to remind everyone, the difference between misdemeanors and infractions. A misdemeanor can subject the violator to a fine of up to $1,000 and up to 6 months in jail, or both. An infraction is fine only, and its first conviction is up to $250, and second or subsequent convictions within 1 year are $500. In the past, the city enforced code violations both as infraction and misdemeanors, and they were prosecuted through the joint efforts of the police department, our office, the Office of the City Attorney, and the Office of the District Attorney. We had a process where the citations came to our office, they were prepared and referred over to the District Attorney for prosecution. In the past, the Code Enforcement Division focused really on building, zoning, and health and safety code violations on private property, and again, primarily pursued administrative proceedings, although occasionally criminal citations as well. Around about 2013, the practices shifted in large part due to loss of some personnel in our office, City Attorney's Office, as well as reduction in staff over at the District Attorney's Office. We, in general, stopped pursuing code violations as misdemeanors, except for in very unusual circumstances. And instead, the police were issuing infraction citations. Misdemeanor citations were still issued by the police department for state criminal code violations. City code violations have not been referred to the district attorney, are not being referred currently. Our office is involved not at all in the criminal proceedings, but rather only in the civil and administrative enforcement. And again, the Code Enforcement Division continues to pursue primarily through civil and administrative hearings, although occasionally will issue criminal citations. As we mentioned last May, when we came to you in May, we were just beginning to explore our options for resuming the practice of allowing police to cite violations as misdemeanors where appropriate. And we are now looking to move forward with that practice. We see it as another tool for enforcement of our existing codes, and we see it that it will be used when there are serious violations and repeated violations. This will be within the discretion of the police officer and will depend on the circumstance. But again, the intention is that this will be used only for serious violations, repeated violations, and as a tool to moving people towards compliance with our codes. We recognize that partnerships are needed with the district attorney, the county sheriff, and the courts. I have been in discussions with the district attorney. She has agreed to take on prosecution of misdemeanor violations of our code. And we are currently in discussions to develop an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. And that MOU, we anticipate, will address both procedures and cost sharing. We will be also initiating coordination with the sheriff and the courts. Obviously, both of those entities will be involved as well. I spoke with the district attorney this morning, and she is coordinating with them as well. Staff at both the city and the county recognize that in some instances, these enforcement actions may impact homeless individuals, and it is, I think staff at both the city and the county are very much committed to providing opportunities for diversion when a violator identifies as homeless. And that is, we are going to be looking at different points in the process to divert folks into social services and existing support services through both the city and the county. We also anticipate that in doing those diversion efforts, we will be coordinating with our nonprofit service providers, again, utilizing our existing programs and ensuring that there are several points along the way where we can move people from the criminal prosecution and instead into support services. Again, our goal in all of this is to get code enforcement, get compliance with our existing codes, and also to the extent that we're dealing with homeless individuals, getting folks into services and ultimately into housing. We're very much seeing this as simply another tool in our toolbox. A Code Enforcement Division will remain essentially unchanged. Code enforcement will still focus on building, zoning, health and safety codes, still focus more on private property rather than violations in the public realm. And we'll continue to seek resolution of cases through the administrative process and obviously as quickly as possible through that process. If voluntary compliance is not received or not achieved through that process, then administrative citations may be issued. And as before and as reported back in May, misdemeanor citations are sometimes utilized if violations occur 3 or more times in the period of 1 year. We're here today really to let you know of our intent and to answer any questions. And so I open it back up.
Thank you, Ms. Gallagher. Council, questions? Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you. I was hoping you could give us a little bit more information on the diversion opportunities that you're talking about. I think anytime we have this conversation, it becomes really apparent quickly that we're trying to solve a problem with an arm tied behind our back when it comes to mental health services and substance abuse issues. I will note some of what we are talking about is alcohol and drug use, which I think most of us agree is not appropriate to take place in public, but then also most of us would agree incarceration is not the best way to address those issues as well. So I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about what opportunities there are for diversion on some of those.
Sure. I'm actually going to hand it over to Captain Navarro as he's on the ground.
Good evening. So there's several places where we have an opportunity to help with diversion and provide resources for people who need it. We are in pretty much daily contact with hosts when we're going to calls for service. We are having weekly meetings with several of our service providers, the District Attorney's Office and the Sheriff's Department, to see, make sure everybody is on the same page. Some of the opportunities that we have do include the mobile support team, host, which is Catholic Charities, Buckaloo, which is a mental health provider, and also Social Advocates for Youth, who specialize in transitionally aged youth up to 24 years old. So we have several opportunities to provide those resources or offer the resources for the people that we contact. And then after which, if people do get arrested or there is an enforcement action, we continue to work with host, and host has continued to make connection points with the Sonoma County Jail. So when people are discharged, they're actually contacting people as they're coming out and providing resources and actually helping them get into services when they come out. They're also working with the court system right now to be part of the diversion programs.
And if I may, I'll simply add to that that the district attorney has also indicated her commitment to facilitate that diversion and to take all actions at initial time when folks are brought over and throughout the process. So it's both in the police, in the district attorney, and through the jail system.
And so for some of these, and those in particular, where you have the authority in the city code already to look for administrative remedies or procedures, would there be potential for, in the instance of substance abuse, to divert into resources for substance abuse treatment rather than the conviction of a misdemeanor that might affect somebody's ability to get into housing, find a job, those sorts of things?
Yes, we are looking at what options there are after an arrest and through the court procedures. We do not have those mechanisms yet in place, but that is certainly something that we are looking at.
And while you're looking at those, are you also looking at some restorative justice practices for some of the other things that we'll be discussing?
Our office has not specifically looked at restorative justice, and I don't know whether other divisions have.
What I can tell you is that the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office, they do have restorative justice and resources that they do use. I don't know the entire extent of it, but those are options. And no matter if whether people are arrested or if we're contacting people, we're not doing any type of enforcement in a silo. We are actually continuing to provide resources and offer those services to make sure that people are getting the services they need.
All right, I just ask in part of this conversation, there is a section in the city's code under the graffiti section specifically that deals with youth offenders, and it does have practices that are laid out in there that are very similar to restorative justice practices. Rather than getting a permanent mark on a youth's record, it allows them to clean up the graffiti and maintain the area that they had graffiti on for a year. And so I just use that or point out that as a potential model for some of what we can do related to this conversation. I'm sure I'll have more questions and comments, Mr. Mayor, but I think I'll wait until after public comment for the rest of them.
Thank you. And I just wanted to follow up on the question about diversion resources. Earlier this year, we had a presentation here from representatives of the homeless court. Do you know what the status of that program is at this point?
I do know that it is in place, and it is going through some transformations right now. I don't know the details of that, but that is certainly something that we are looking at coordinating with the district attorney and the courts on. But I'm sorry, I don't know the details.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin Navarro, could you explain the kind of training that has gone on in the police department? Because this is going back to a condition that we had a number of years ago, and now it was changed. And now we're going back, looking at going back in how we deal with responses to, or how we respond to city code violations. What kind of training has taken place for the department?
So specific to city ordinance violations?
Just now that we're changing our response somewhat, or looking at changing our response somewhat.
So we have a training division, and our training sergeant provides bulletins to the entire department regarding any type of changes or updates that may impact our staff. So we work with our training division on that. We also have had hosts come in, speak with our managers when host was created. They have offered to come into briefing trainings, to do briefing trainings. So it's an ongoing discussion, really. That's the way we look at it. But most of it comes through our training bulletins and information that's coming from our downtown enforcement team and collaborative work with the other agencies in the county.
I appreciate that. I ask because in days gone by, the citation would be issued and that would be it. But now there are many more options available to the officers. So that's why I asked you about the training. Thank you.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding, even under the current infraction system, if people are accumulating fines and they have the inability to pay, or they fail to appear, is a bench warrant issued for their arrest, and could they experience jail time regardless, even with an infraction?
Currently, the city ordinance violations are sent to traffic court, which goes to collections if they fail to appear, and no bench warrant is issued.
Okay, thank you. The city made a decision, I think it was somewhere around 2013, to move away from misdemeanors and move to infractions. Do we know the rationale behind that council's decision?
It appears that it was not a council decision. That's all I can say. It is not clear how that decision-making process took place. What we do know is there was the best way I can describe it is a plea mixed with an order from traffic court to stop sending misdemeanor infractions its way. And at that point, we stopped processing misdemeanor infractions with the traffic court, misdemeanors with the traffic court. And there was no conversation with council on this topic.
Other questions? Ms. Combs.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward to us. I want to appreciate the city manager for asking for clarification on this item. I think some of us thought we had a previous policy on citation versus infraction versus misdemeanor that was not in place. So I appreciate the request for clarification. I have a couple of questions. I'm not finding in here an analysis regarding increased cost to the city or the county for making this change in the informal policy that had existed. So is there an analysis here of any increased cost to the city or the county for doing this?
We have not prepared a financial impact analysis. I think the way that we see this rolling out is that this is, as I said, another tool in our toolbox. The efforts that are being made by the police in even issuing citations, in trying to get folks into compliance with our codes, and if homeless, into services, those efforts will continue. And I'll let Captain Navarro correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't anticipate that there would be any significant cost increase. The procedures are in place. It will be really another tool to use. In terms of the, this is with respect to the police department costs. With respect to the prosecution, once it gets over to the district attorney, we do anticipate that there will be a cost. As I mentioned, the district attorney and I are in discussions and developing MOU. The MOU will include both procedural provisions and also a provision for cost sharing. In the past number of years, we previously had a contract with the district attorney. That contract ran about $13,000 more or less for the last probably 5-6 years, and we would anticipate that that cost would be pretty comparable.
I'm sorry, can you clarify for me what that $13,000 covered? Did it cover the police officer having to be with someone in court? Did it cover your time working on the case?
That covered the district attorney costs.
Okay, thank you.
There will be no additional costs in our office, as the district attorney has agreed to handle these directly. There may be some minor involvement by our office, but I do not anticipate any significant financial impact to our office. As to our service providers, we will be using all of our existing programs. We will not be adding new programs. We're hoping that this will, may give us opportunity to bring new people into the service system. It may encourage people who have otherwise been resistant to services to avail themselves of those opportunities. But again, we are not anticipating any new financial demands or needs for our service providers. And again, not that Captain Navarro, if there's any costs that you see.
There's no foreseeable major impacts as far as cost goes for the police department.
I appreciate those answers. Slide 3 says the city attorney has discretion to prosecute instead as an infraction. So I'm trying to understand how the process works. If you can just sort of help me understand that. A police officer uses judgment and gives a misdemeanor or an infraction, and then the city attorney's office is noticed that an infraction or a misdemeanor was given and makes another decision. Can you clarify that process for me, and how it is that that's not going to overwhelm your staff?
Sure. Yes, the code gives our office that authority. As a practical matter, our office has not been involved in any criminal prosecution either at the misdemeanor or infraction level since 2013. And I do not see that changing with this, with resumption of the misdemeanor charges. Those will go directly over to the district attorney. Again, there may be some coordination through our office, but they will not be coming to us as a, for any significant work.
So while it says that our city attorney will be having that discretion, it will in fact be the district attorney that will be using that discretion at the county's level?
That will be a part of the provision of our MOU.
Okay. And did I understand correctly that we haven't had a lengthy conversation with the individuals involved with the homeless court?
I have not.
Okay. I hope that we have that conversation. Do we have data available on how this works, how this doesn't work? What's the impact on homeless people, for example? If they have a criminal record or a $1,000 fine, show a bad credit report because they can't pay fines. Do we have data on the impact on their ability to get housing in the future after a program like this is implemented?
No, I do not have that data.
Okay. Do we have information about how many beds are currently available for our 2,000 homeless folks?
We can get that information. We do know the number of beds at Sam Jones Hall, and we do also are aware that there will be some beds set aside for folks that are diverted out of arrest or out of booking. We will be part of this program to make sure that when someone is looking at a potential arrest or has been arrested and is looking at potential booking and is given the opportunity to divert to services, that there is a bed available for those folks.
So I'm hearing that we're going to hold some beds at Sam Jones Hall, maybe as many as 3 beds at Sam Jones Hall overnight in case someone is going to arrive. Is that by using this process, is that, am I hearing about right? I mean, even if the number's wrong, is that about what the plan is?
Again, I think right now that's being worked out, Councilmember. There has not been, there has been some numbers kicked around, but that has not been finalized what that number is.
It's certainly not 50 beds. It's certainly a number below what one large encampment site might be. Under 10, I'm guessing. The rumor I heard was 3. Okay. I'm aware that, can you clarify for me what provisions in addition to the Sam Jones bed, beds are being made available that meet ADA requirements for persons with mental health, mental illness, PTSD, rape or domestic violence, folks who can't really go into a bed in a group setting comfortably? Do we have special provisions for those kinds of beds available for this program?
My understanding is this folks that are subject to arrest or booking will be able to avail themselves of any of our existing programs, whether that's at Sam Jones Hall or other other locations or other types of accommodations. I'm afraid that I'm not fully versed on the full range of services that Host provides, or that any of our list of service providers, as Captain Navarro mentioned, say Buckaloo, Catholic Charities.
Is SAY holding some beds for youth? Are beds being held in any mental health facility for this purpose? Beds that are single, so that women, for example, don't have to be placed in a large group setting with mixed gender who have had traumatic experiences.
I mean, we can take these down and ask
Okay.
some questions, but
It would concern me to move forward without meeting our ADA requirements that include not just people in physical disabilities, but people with mental health disabilities, PTSD, and domestic violence issues. So that would concern me going forward. I hope that in the future we'll be able to answer that question. I have some other questions and comments, but I think I'll wait for public comment on those. Thank you very much.
Any further questions, Council? We'll move on to public comment at this point. Eileen Bill, she'll be followed by Darrell Paul.
So you say it's not criminalizing the homeless by increasing the fines and adding jail time. But when you're fining these people for those things that the homeless are apt to do, such as public urination, what are we to think? Where else can one go who has no home? The very few public bathrooms are closed at night, and during the day they're hard to find. People who have homes can drink to excess, but those without risk being jailed. Adding fines and jail sentences to the homeless does not make it easier for them to go into housing, and housing for all is our goal. As it is, renters need basically 3 months' rent up front, but also backed by an income high enough the landlords will accept. Catholic Charities may help with some references, security deposits, and partial rent, but for a minimum of maybe up to 2 years. Waiting lists complicate this problem if you're even on a list. For example, senior housing lists are either closed, or if you're lucky to be on a list, there is a waiting time of a minimum of 3 years. Other housing stock also have waiting lists. So if maybe Catholic Charities has helped you out for up to 2 years and you're on another housing waiting list and your 2 years is up, but your number is not up on that list, you risk being homeless again. Regarding shelters, with nearly all, you have to be out of them during the day, early in the morning, and not return until evening. So basically you're homeless during the day. And where do you go? You can't sleep in the park, can't drink in the park, can't pee in the park, because a lot of parks don't have bathrooms. So there needs to be a better plan. There are lots of empty lots throughout the city. And you can allow people to put camps there, allow our huts, which are meant to be transitional shelters until people can get back on their own feet. Putting in porta potties and trash bins allow people some dignity and safety. So don't increase the fines and add jail times. Some of the diversion things sound possible, but help the homeless. Thank you.
Darrell Paul. He'll be followed by Susan Chonko. Folks, please indicate your agreement with speakers by waving your hands instead of clapping, so we can get through what looks like more than an hour of public comment here more efficiently. Thank you. Darrell Paul.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I've lived here in Santa Rosa since about 1962, and I've seen all kinds of changes occurring. But now when we get to this issue of homelessness, it's been going on in our community for many, many years. I say it's tragic. The thing is having to arrest people for a misdemeanor of not having a place to go during the day, as was just commented prior to. The fact that you're walking the streets, and all of a sudden, nature calls you, and you have nowhere to go. Or some businesses, they want you to buy their product just to go and do a nature call. And I think that is really tragic that in our community that we have to even have a conversation about this, and that more needs to be done at community level, i.e. social services that was discussed, i.e. nonprofit groups that was discussed. For me, I just really think it's tragic. It really hurts me to see people in the community that I live, work, and play in homeless, having a challenge of just finding a place to go and be, to go and use restroom facilities. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Susan Chonko, followed by Anita LaFollette.
I work with homeless people at Remembrance Village. It used to be called Camp Michaela. Many of the people in the village have been on waiting lists for a very long time, and many of them have given up even trying to get on waiting lists. The services that are available for homeless people, whether it's housing, mental health, addiction, anything, is so severely lacking that it amazes me that you would come up with something that would marginalize these people even further. That's it.
Thank you. Anita LaFollette, followed by Dwayne DeWitt.
Good evening. I think this is what the gentleman said, a tragedy of the housing developers market. I hope you have heard about the recent case in Oregon. If there's nowhere for people to go, then you can't sweep them. When you use terms in your right up there on the screen, like when identifies as homeless, it shows me obvious discrimination. Maybe what you should say is when identifies as Jewish, because that's what it sounds like. I know a gal who was sleeping under the 6th Street Bridge. She got several tickets, blocking the sidewalk, disobeying, illegal camping. I just want to let you know, the courts don't handle those. They let her off. She didn't plead. They let her off because they're no good. The tickets are not good. I also want you to know that diversion services were reduced by Housing First. That's not a happening thing for any housing program. Isn't that what you mandated just a couple of months ago? And then there's another lady who got several tickets, and actually the police picked her up and took her to jail. They let her out at midnight. She walked home in the rain, this was last fall, in the middle of the night. That was not safe, and that did no good at all. I also today, actually, saw a crippled man. His wheelchair was put off to the side. He was sleeping by a fence on Guerneville Road. A crippled man. Who are we coming to? This is not the police at all. I want to tell you, this should not be police work. This is a tragedy, a breakdown in the housing market. And I want you, at this point, to support encampments and encourage the chat program, because I can put another one together tomorrow, if you'll let me. Thank you.
Thank you. Dwayne DeWitt. Is Dwayne DeWitt here? All right. Looks like Glenn Stone King Jones. And he'll be followed by Jay Foxworthy.
I'm actually going to stand in front of you and also turn around to the police and the city attorney.
Please do your best to speak in the microphone. We have a hard time hearing you when you turn around.
I have a solution to this problem. No one here has actually spoken about weed and abatement. And I see a lot of work all over the city to pick up trash, weed whack. So we have a diversion program for someone who is violating a code enforcement. Here would be a great thing. We could put, even I would donate weed whackers and even put together a group of people who have these infractions, and we could beautify this city really quickly. That's what I do for a living, as you can see. I'm a homeless veteran. I don't find upping this to a misdemeanor as an effective way of creating a working relationship between the homeless citizens, and they are citizens of this city, and the police department. I can't imagine Officer Navarro's job of having to deal with all of this. Why don't we build some self-esteem and some really positive solutions to this problem? Build some self-esteem to some homeless people who are very able-bodied, and put together a team of people, scrub graffiti off of walls, weed whack, maybe even plant some flowers, create some positive environment for not only the tax-paying citizens of this city to say, hey, these are great people. They're really doing a good job in our city. And so for there, we could actually have some abatement and weed control addressed as well. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Jay Foxworthy, followed by Tracy Weizenberg.
Hi, it's nice to be here tonight. I'm Jay Foxworthy, and I'm actually going to be running for sheriff next year. And I want to tell you a little about my youth in my childhood here in Sonoma County. I have a mother who's mentally ill and who's an addict, and I spent many years homeless here in this county. Now today I look around this county and I'm actually very appreciative of it, and I think I won the lottery by being born here. But back then I didn't, because I did live in encampments, and I have lived in storage containers, and I have been drug around this county by a mother who was scared of law enforcement. These policies are going to make homeless people, people who are mentally ill, people who are addicts scared of law enforcement. They're not appropriate, and I'm strongly against them. I feel like there's better ways to do this. In San Francisco, where I work, we have a quality of life crimes court that deals with these issues. When I first started working there, we had 2,800 people in jail. We now have 1,100. That works. It works because when people first come in and they're addicts or they have mental health issues, we classify them. We're not just concerned about gang members, we're not just concerned about violent people, we're concerned about people who have real life issues. When you address those issues, you stop people from coming back into jail, and you actually can help them. That starts in the jail system, it starts outside the jail system, and it starts when officers first come across people who are homeless or mentally ill. So I've been all over this county recently running for sheriff, and I've been talking to lots of people. And one of the things I say is, man, it's amazing that we live in a progressive county, and I think I have a really great opportunity to win this race. And I keep getting told that a lot of the politicians in this county are not as progressive as I think. And I actually hope I'm wrong. And I think if you guys vote to pass this amendment, then maybe they're right, because it's the wrong thing to do. There are other choices you can make, there are other options you can take, and I hope you do. Thank you.
Tracy Weizenberg, and she'll be followed by Attila Nagy.
Good evening, Mayor Corsi, members of the City Council. My name is Tracy Weitzenberg, Director of Public Policy for the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber. We support and applaud the city's efforts in creating a vibrant hub for our community by restoring the square in the heart of downtown. The Chamber has continually supported the city's staff to work toward enforcing quality of life offenses under direction of the mayor and the council to find solutions to these problems. Misdemeanor enforcement requires a collaborative partnership between the City of Santa Rosa Police Department, the Sonoma County District Attorney, the county courts, and the county jail. This is not meant to criminalize the homeless, but rather hold accountable those repeated and serious violations of our city code. We want everyone in our community to feel safe and enjoy their experiences in downtown Santa Rosa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Attila Nagy. He'll be followed by Alice Lynn.
Hi. Interesting you have questions up there because I'm starting my little query with, I have some questions. So my name is Attila Nagy. I live here in Santa Rosa, and thank you all for being here. So what does the Santa Rosa City Council and city staff care about? Are you listening to the public's input, or is your mind made up to implement these proposed cruel policies in order to please the tourist industry and the business community? And that's a reply to the business community. How long would it take for a person without means to panhandle to pay $1,000 fine? I mean, how ridiculous is that? Is 6 months in jail a solution for housing those in need of a decent place to rest and sleep? Have you had conversations with those among us without housing? I'm sure everybody here is sleeping comfortably tonight. Rather than sweep people away to where? Out of sight, out of mind. That seems to be what people want to do, is just not deal with it. And I appreciate all these ideas that people are coming up, but they really don't make sense. I think you need to start with your conscience. So I'm appealing to your conscience to guide your decisions to do the right thing, not be swayed by the demands of the well-to-do. The City Council is elected to care about and act in the interest of the entire Santa Rosa community. Prioritize housing and services for those who need it, instead of criminalizing people who are most vulnerable in this society, in our society. So I hope you do the right thing. Thank you. By the way, I don't know how much time I have left.
A little bit of time.
Okay, I want to read, this is from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself, herself, and his or her entire family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control or her control. Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection. Now, there are a lot of articles in the Declaration of Human Rights, and unfortunately, we're not living up to them, and it is a very good declaration. And I just hope that you do the right thing and vote this thing down, because it's not the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Alice Lynn, and she'll be followed by Merlin.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. I'm the person who submitted the petition from Homeless Action today, which you hopefully received today. More beds, not jail, for people experiencing homelessness. It was written by 3 of us. And let's see, as of 11 a.m. today, we had 83 signatures from Santa Rosa in 3 days, a total of, 196 as of 11 a.m. today, and as of now, it's 358 signatures, so it's just starting to really pick up. We also have 65 signatures by hand from Sonoma County, for a total of 423 signatures, but these are from people not just in Santa Rosa. And let's see, I think I'll just leave it there for there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Merlin, and he'll be followed by Marcel Roden.
So, whose quality of life? This isn't about quality of life. This is about making privileged people who would rather shut their eyes to people suffering. It's about making them feel more comfortable. That the people suffering on the streets at their feet, they don't have to look at them. This is about preserving property values for the wealthy. A society is judged by how it treats its weakest and its most vulnerable. Emma Lazarus in 1883 wrote, "As we erected one of the great wonders of the world, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." We made a promise to take people in, to treat them with dignity and respect, to welcome them as our own. For anyone who supports these ordinances and their heavier punishment, consider how you would feel if the people targeted by them were your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your son, your daughter. For everyone else in this room, for everyone in this city, consider the privilege and the power of the people supporting this, who are protected, whose families will never actually have to face that risk of being thrown in prison. Housing first, huh? Jail is housing first? Really? Shame on you.
Marcel Roden, he'll be followed by Jerry Lalonde.
Hello, my name is Marcel Rodin. I've lived in Santa Rosa for 19 years. I'm 83 years young. I've lived in 12 cities throughout the United States. Santa Rosa is the second worst place I've ever lived as far as treatment of the citizens, the people. I use a bicycle. I sold my car several years ago, and I ride my bicycle up and down the city in many bike paths, bike trails, and I encounter homeless people consistently, and I could see it's a really tragic situation. I have a couple of questions to ask the City Council and for questions for the audience to reflect upon. First of all, the City Council approved a $10.5 million tax fund to reunify Railroad Square. Now, the question I have to ask is how many homes would $10.5 million build for the homeless? Wouldn't that be a better use of our money, our money? I did a little research into policing, and I found out that Chicago, which is one of the most violent cities in the country, as you'll probably admit, spends 37% of the budget on policing. Santa Rosa, for your information, spends about half of that, a little over 17%. Santa Rosa is currently spending $58.5 million on policing. What about putting some of that money into housing for the homeless? Thank you.
Jerry Lalonde, and he'll be followed by Peter Cherneff.
As always, I'm honored to participate in this aspect of democracy. The city of Santa Rosa should not change its laws considering people who are homeless until it has done everything possible to mitigate the situation. Increasing penalties penalizes many people for no good reason. The law as suggested for change today does not serve the people who are trying to get off the streets and make it to productive citizenship. With sincere, genuine acknowledgement for all that you have done and that city staff has done and that the city of Santa Rosa has done, I have some concerns about what you're doing tonight. So you need to be fair. You need to fulfill the basic data requirements for what you're considering. So based on my observation of your May 2nd meeting, I had a whole series of questions about why that I wonder about should have been presented today, and I would ask you as a council to ask for staff to bring those back. First of all, how many serious and repeated violations have there been? What's the historic data from 2005 to 2008, from 2008 to 2012, from 2012 to 2017? Those were the time frames when all of this law got changed. We don't know. You don't know, so you don't know if there's any trends, and neither do I. How many publicly available toilets are there open in the city today during the day? And how many are available at night? And are those mapped on the city website so we who are advocating for people who have no homes can have a place to send them so they can actually do their personal bodily functions? How are you going to track warnings and infractions and misdemeanors? What are they doing now? What's the proportion of the infractions would you have upgraded to misdemeanors? Because you have no way to assess the law that you're proposing unless you have that data gathering in place. And I am pretty sure that the city police have that available. Have them give it to you, but have them give it to us. We need that kind of data. The data that was presented at the May meeting, there were some issues with the 87% non-appearance. Some of those were non-appearance and some of those were pending. So what was, some of that data was missing that we didn't have. Can there be a monthly and a quarterly report of these kind of infractions? And can those infractions be mapped to where your known homeless camps are? Some really basic information. I honestly don't know how to recommend what you do and how you return to this misdemeanor thing because I don't have the data. So I have to speak for the people who I hope I'm speaking for when I'm saying this. There should be the links on your not only on your council agendas, but also on, frankly, in the Press Democrat as well, to cite the report that was prepared for today, and also to cite like your own website on homelessness. You have so much stuff going on, but that has to be gathered. So I appreciate you listening, and I'll give other comments offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Cherneff, followed by Thomas Morabito.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'm sure to make more friends on this one. I'll start off by saying I second the statement of the homeless veteran who works at landscaping. Secondly, the world does not owe anyone anything, let alone a home. And disregarding spiritual truths have their own consequences. As you do unto the least of me was always a reference to the animals, now see. The homeless, the imprisoned, most all slaves, which is most all of us, find themselves on the very similar conveyor belt, the same as factory farm sentience. And to disregard me is to disregard yourself, is to disregard the living Lord, the only one that lays down the sword. You've all been given the answer of a 40-day strike, and all you do is whine instead and hold signs. The system cares not for your well-being, concerns, or disasters, especially in a nation that be serving two masters. The same modus operandi I see here, I saw at all 100 tables at the Progressive Festival. Waiting for someone else to set you free of your slave status is purely and simply slave status mentality. Nothing less and nothing more. And so, the City Council cannot fix your problems. The best they can do is assist and facilitate, perhaps in considering what the veteran spoke about earlier. All right? You know, when it comes to the jails and their bench warrants and courts, the courts are cash registers that seem rather intractable. My own experience, the court called me today. They want me to call back about a speeding ticket. And in fact, I was accelerating to avoid a safety issue, but they've ignored 4 or 5 letters, and all they want is their money. So that's all it is. That's the system. All they want is your money. If you don't have money, you don't have a home. So find an answer. And you've had answers. You just don't want to do them. You'd rather hold signs and keep asking the people that are supposed to be your servants. And you're talking to them like they're their masters. You got everything backwards. There's free food for anybody at St. Vincent's. But what I suggest in regards to a worldly solution is create programs, 20-hour-a-week programs, for individuals that want to utilize tents and such like that in a large commercial building with running water facilities during the winter. Create some sort of a bridge. Have them build boxes. Have them do what the veteran spoke about, okay? And if we don't do this, it's because you are abiding by spiritual principles, so congratulations. But if you want to continue, if you don't, then we're verifying Professor Canini's statement about outsourced slave operations. Like the gentleman said, there's plenty of work to do.
Thank you. Thomas Morabito, followed by Laura Aguirre.
I'm going to get down in the gutter and talk about public urination. Everybody eats, sleeps, defecates, urinates. These are necessities, they're not choices. Well, let's say I drive from Sebastopol to Santa Rosa, decide to have a little picnic in the Reunited Plaza, and I have to go to the bathroom. Where do I go? I'm serious. Where do I go? The merchants aren't going to help me unless they can make a profit, a small profit off my urination. So, where do I go? You're promising to use some kind of discretion, and you're only going to prosecute the real serious crimes here. Isn't that what the whole ICE thing promised to do? How's that all working out? Does discretion mean that you're not going to cite someone for public urination if they really had to go bad? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Come on, people, a little compassion here. Instead of putting people in jail, why not provide public bathrooms like Sebastopol, Petaluma, Healdsburg? And in, I don't know about here, but in New Jersey, if an establishment serves food to the public, they must provide facilities, bathroom facilities, whether you're a customer or not. It's hard to believe New Jersey's a little more civilized than California in that respect. You know, we just had a great success story in Sebastopol. A longtime homeless man was given a small subsidy to rent a tiny trailer. That was about a year ago. Now he's working 2 jobs. He's got a dog, and he bought a car last month. That's the ticket. Put people inside, then solve the other problems. Giving people tickets they can't afford to pay or overcrowding our jails with minor offenses will do much more harm than good. These people, I hate even saying that. All people are part of our family. I think you got a pretty good idea what the public thinks on this issue. Thank you for your time.
Laura Aguirre, followed by Bernice Espinosa.
Hi, and good evening.
Go ahead and pull that microphone down a little bit. So you can speak.
Hi, and good evening. I'm a homeless California teacher with service of 40 years. I have a master's from Stanford, and I graduated UC with honors, but I find myself homeless because I am very disabled, and my disability pension doesn't get me as far as it could. It should. At any rate, I'm here to speak to you about the presence of I'm a Doyle Park patron. I love Doyle Park. I go there every morning at 6 o'clock to meditate and do my yoga, walk my dog, and sing with my homeless friend, also homeless in a car, who's a poet and a musician. and a lovely person who prays an hour every day before we begin. I would like to just go on with the police presence there. The police have not bothered me in particular, but I go during the day, and I do see them. Since your last city council meeting, where you voted, I believe, not to use the $100,000 for safe parking, which I believe is the most affordable housing in the county. It's unfortunate, but I have seen a terrible increase of police in the park. They come in single cars by 2 cars. They come on foot, 1 policeman, 2 policemen, and often with dogs. They approach anyone. This is at different times during the day. I'm not there all day. I go in the morning and leave, and sometimes in the afternoon I come back, but I see these things when I'm there. Approaching people who are sitting under a tree, who are sitting on the grass, asking them for their ID, and then when they prove their ID, the police says, "This is only a P.O. box." "Yes," he says, "I only have a P.O. box, like I do." I realize this must cost a lot of money, and I think of what we can do with the money other than bring more police presence to the park. Yet I know that there's problems to deal with, and I understand that too. There must be a better way than incrementing and paying police to come to the park to ask people for their ID. This is during the day. My friends, homeless friends, tell me in the evening, anyone found under a bench or on a bench on the grass or with are fined, and they are being fined, most certainly. And I think that this is very unfortunate when, again, so many people have said it, but I'll say it again, when you're poor and you don't have resources to be found for something that you can't really do anything about, I feel is unjust. And that's about it. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
And we are basically elderly, disabled, and many people who have owned their own businesses, who have been professionals in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guy.
Thank you.
Gary. Bernice Espinoza, followed by Kathleen Finnegan.
Good evening. My name is Bernice Espinoza, and I come as just a community member. I'm a resident of Santa Rosa for the last 19 months. My professional occupation is a public defender. And while I didn't prepare any statements prior to coming here, I did want to discuss my experience as a defense attorney and working in public defense for the last 11 years. Also, having lived in places where there is a high occupation of homelessness, such as Berkeley and Concord, and the treatment of homelessness in other places. As a defense attorney, one of the things that I often see is that my clients who are given these type of misdemeanors and brought into custody oftentimes are mentally ill, or also are non-citizens, and by going through the misdemeanor process and being booked are actually making them susceptible to being contacted by ICE, which is contrary to some of the resolutions that have been previously passed by this council. And additionally, one of the things that I have seen in my experience is that my clients do not have money, and they have often sacrificed their time in custody in order to pay their fines. When a person does go through the criminal justice system, there are mandatory restitution fines and mandatory fees that cannot be waived, and others that are done based on ability to pay. A misdemeanor has a required $150 restitution fee. There's an administrative fee for attorneys. There's an administrative fee for processing of papers. And I would also like to have the council consider the fact that they're making themselves susceptible for liability. Earlier this year in March, The East Bay Community Law Center, the Equal Justice Works, and 20 other nonprofit organizations signed on to an amicus brief opposing the criminalization of poverty and People versus Dueñas. And that would also subject some of the council and also the city to liability. I understand that we have a problem here. I do live near Coddingtown. I do see the homeless in my backyard on a daily basis. What I do recognize is that, unfortunately, the criminal justice system does not have the resources or the means in order to take care of individuals there. I have literally been told by probation that they are offering 30 days of jail time in order to go into some of the shelters by the jail staff. They need at least 30 days. My clients who are too tired. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Finnegan, followed by Jennifer Laporta.
I'm Kathleen Finnegan. I live in Santa Rosa. Good evening. Please forgive me. I'm having a really rough day today. It started out with the news that the chump in Washington is promising North Korea with fire and fury that the world has never yet seen, so fearsome. And here we are having what's supposed to be a serious conversation about quality of life that I find, I'm not quite believing that this is true. This is more like a nightmare to me, that we're talking in serious terms about spending time and treasure, resources to what? To what? I'm hearing a proposal that further penalizes the downtrodden here. It doesn't seem to have much sense to me, to make much sense, to issue fines to people who can't pay them. And what do you do with them when they can't pay? You're providing services clearly needed, but you can provide the services from, dawn to dusk, and the problem remains. The problem is the homeless have no homes. Let's talk about the problem, please. When we're, it's making me think, when we live here in beautiful wine country, frankly, at the moment, it seems a little more like North Korea to me. I urge this body in the strongest of terms to reject this proposal and to redouble your efforts to focus on the problem. Find safe, temporary but safe housing with sanitary facilities for people who have nowhere else to go. Please, remember, the homeless have no homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Laporta, followed by Dana Bellwether.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Laporta and I live in Santa Rosa. This idea is just, it doesn't make any sense. How can people pay these fines when they have no jobs, they have no money? Why don't we give them safe options, like at least people who have vehicles could have some safe parking? How about some safe parking lots with restrooms available to them 24 hours? How about that? Something like that. Aren't there places in this town where we can do that? Some old county facilities, perhaps, that have land that we could do that? I mean, this could easily be one of your brothers, your sisters, your mothers, your fathers, your kids who are homeless, your neighbors, there but for the grace of God. Go any of us. So please think of solutions, not criminalizing. Thank you.
Dana Bellwether, followed by Richard Canini.
Good evening, I'm Dana Bellwether, and I live just a few blocks from here. If the real concern were sanitation, the proposal would be to put out a lot of porta potties all around town. The fact that the proposal is to inflict this degree of cruelty on people who have done nothing violent leads me to believe that someone is thinking of this population as lesser beings, so much lesser that their pain just doesn't count. It absolutely doesn't matter at all. So I want to give you one example, my own, of how a person can become homeless. I was homeless for about 1.5 years, and it was not because I was strung out, stupid, lazy, or fearful of living inside a building. It was because the Sonoma County government defrauded me of my life's savings in the property tax default auction, and then because I couldn't live on the land that it had sold me, I lost my SSI, my Medi-Cal, my food stamps, and I was, before I discovered that the county was never going to let me onto the land I'd bought from it, I had spoken with a contractor who had gone out there and looked it over with me and said he would have me on my land in 2 weeks. But he thereafter spoke with someone who scared him off from even trying, and I discovered that the county would not give me a key to either of the gates to the land, and I could not retract my notice to leave my apartment, and I had no place to sleep one night. And it was about 1.5 years before I could get anything resembling a home. One place you might start, besides porta potties, is maybe ask the county government not to steal from the people it has sworn to serve, many of whom are also your constituents. It's been 9 years. I could have been living in my own house for the past 7 years at the least if the county didn't sell property it knows it will never allow the buyer to use. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Canini, followed by Gary Lentz.
Quality of life issues, public defecation and urination. You do not want to solve this problem. You want to attack this problem. The city was given a grant to install a porta potty, and they returned the grant because they don't have, a system, a program to apply this donation. All you need to do is call a porta potty company. They deliver it, they service it, and they'll take it away. I would have loaned you my phone if I thought you needed one. Walked right into that. You don't want to solve this problem. You want to attack it. Where does the fine money go? Who gets it? I put my notes on the back. I only had one piece of paper. It's a low-budget operation I'm operating. Okay. You're renting space in the garage for $31 a month. That space is probably 8 by 20 feet. Want to put some partitions up there and make that the homeless. There are parties in some of the garages, $31 a month per space. There you go. But that money's going to the parking district, and that's the same group as the Chamber of Commerce and the downtown business, which is pushing for hammering the homeless. Now, let's take a look at the Chamber of Commerce. As you know, they were running a kickback scheme with 2 mayors. And I figured that cost our city about $1 million. And they've never offered to return that. What's $1 million look like? I'll sell you that for $1,000. Okay, this is a problem. But here's the other thing. These people should ask for a trial, and the jury hopefully will know about nullification. A jury may find a defendant not guilty even though the jurors know beyond a doubt that they violated the ordinance or the law that they're on trial for. This is called nullification. It's well established in the law. It's not in the Constitution, but it's well established. This is probably your greatest power, you up there in the cheap seats in the peanut gallery. If you're ever on a jury and you don't agree with the law or how it's being applied, teach your fellow jurors about nullification. They're not going to brief you on this in the courthouse, but now you know about it. Nullify it.
Gary Lentz, followed by Elizabeth Nealon. Don't worry about it.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to address you. I think this is absolutely common sense, and I'm so glad you're addressing it, because I'm going to speak for the taxpayers of Sonoma County, of the city of Santa Rosa, and just say that we want the quality of life to return to something, approximating normal. It's been very difficult. I mean, we depend on tourism in this community for our lifeblood. And I used to live in San Francisco for 10 years, and I can tell you the reputation of San Francisco is not far ahead of ours right now. When you walk down the street, you smell urine, you see homeless people, and it's a tragedy, and I get it, and I'm sorry about it. But it is not your job, as you're stewarding the taxpayers' funds here, and I know you do it very well and you do it very carefully. It's not your job to provide housing. And I know you're trying to do that, and that's fantastic that you're trying to do that, but it's not what your job is. Your job is to uphold the quality of life and make it so that the citizens can feel safe. I'm not only a taxpayer, I'm a father of 4 daughters. And I don't feel comfortable letting them walk down a lot of our streets. And I know the ladies who will not walk under the 6th Street underpass because for fear of their safety. So I just want to speak on behalf of people who pay taxes, people who want their city to be clean, people who want to be safe in their city. Just because crime has not reached my neighborhood yet, I've heard a lot of stories about other neighborhoods that have been plagued by crime from homeless encampments that are near their homes. And they're upset. I don't know why they're not here, but I'm upset for them.
$400 out of my pension to the feds every month.
So,
Taxes too.
So what I'd like to say is this is absolutely common sense. Your job is to enforce the laws, and the laws are there for a reason. I'm sorry that homelessness is such a tragedy, but it's not your job to solve it. Your job is to make the streets safe for our citizens, including my 4 daughters and all the citizens of this community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Elizabeth Nealon.
I don't have anything for the overhead tonight, but I'm glad I'm here. I'm catching a bus at 7 o'clock in the Transit Mall, so I'll be quick. Okay. Yes, I was born 3 days after my parents moved to this country from Canada. I was born in Louisiana. My name was Elizabeth Churchill Lloyd. Growing up as a child, I was already watching the evening news to see, what the world was doing. And I had the thought, what if we're the bad guys? And we are. We are. And if Santa Rosa solved this problem, a lot of homeless people from other areas would come here, and you all know it. What would be the best thing of all would be a nice 20-acre field with police presence, broken up into little places where people could call it their own space. I personally call the earth my home, and although I've lived without a dwelling place, I've never been without a home. And if I ever talk to someone who calls themselves homeless, I say, you never need to do that again. The earth is your home. And I have lived in the county for 44 years. I now think of Santa Rosa as a hick town with racist cops. Because my son D'Artagnan was homeless here. He was attacked by an 18-year-old kid. He had blood all over him, a big gash in his head. And the Santa Rosa PD said, "You're drunk." He said, "I'm not drunk." They said, "You're drunk. Put your hands behind your back." And then 5 officers subdued him, and they kept him in jail for 4 days. I'm not going to talk about that anymore right now, but you will be hearing about my son, D'Artagnan, who has a master's degree from Stanford in hydrogeology and a bachelor's degree from Berkeley in biology, and who was identified as mentally gifted in the 5th grade with an IQ of 155. Anything else to say? Okay, let's see. My sign. I believe in boycotting violence of all kinds. This is kind of a violent thing and a cruel thing to do to someone who has no home, no money. The criminal justice system is bizarre. I'm a follower of Gandhi's teachings. I have been into court 25 times to defend my right to hold a sign that says "Mother needs help." Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob Hanson, followed by Celeste Austin.
Good evening, everybody. How many times have we listened to this same discussion? I'd like to take you back to May the 3rd, 2016. Courthouse Square Design and Review Committee. First 20 minutes of that committee was questioning our police department on how to remove the homeless from the downtown square. Our police department stood firm. Unless there was a crime being committed, they would not and could not interfere with the public. They figured out a way to get the homeless out. They destroyed a beautiful park. I don't have the answers. I've had the fortune to talk to many of our city council members in private. They're good people. I've liked everybody I've talked to, but this discussion doesn't stop. The only solution I can find is put 500 tents in the downtown square. Move 1,000 people into the square, and then you'll get some results. Act with respect. Act like citizens of the United States, which the homeless are. $24 million allocated for gang intervention. $600,000 for 2,000, 3,000. One is too many. Put 500 tents down there, and then we'll get some action. Then this problem will be addressed. Call a California National Guard. They've got Quonset huts in storage. We've got winter coming. Put them in that park right over there. Put them in the courthouse square, but get these people out of the weather. Thank you.
Celeste Austin, followed by Hugh Futrell.
Good evening. As a service provider, I'm here to share with you that there are gaps in services. As hard as many people are working, there's still people who are outside every night. And of course, working at the living room, we get an opportunity to see that on a daily basis. Just today, working, I would project that a quarter of the women who came into our program will not have a place to sleep at night. They are in between shelters. Shelters do not have beds. There's conflict that happens in some of the shelters with some of the participants, some of the individuals, and it's hard to be there. And so they find themselves under the 6th Street Bridge. They find themselves wherever they can go. We give out just basic essentials to women, and there are children out there too. You need to know that. I was working with a mother with 2 sons, and she couldn't get into one of the shelters because her son is 12 years old, and that particular shelter does not take boy children over the age of 11. You know, we were sitting in the kitchen eating some, sharing some story and top ramen, and just trying to give them some encouragement and some hope on how to be safe, and how this mother is finding a place for her son, but she herself is spending the night underneath the bridge over by the fairgrounds. So there are people outside. There are no places for them to go, as hard as we're working, even though we're increasing the shelter beds, etc. So we need to come up with creative ideas. And this notion about bathrooms is just silly. We need to make sure that there are bathrooms in this neighborhood, in this community, that people have access to. Camp Michaela started off as an encampment, and it's still going pretty strong. We have to be creative in housing solutions. We are looking at the Housing First model, but in the meantime, we need housing solutions for people to have places to sleep safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Hugh Futrell, followed by Thomas Ells.
Hugh Futrell, 200 4th Street. Thank you for taking up this issue. I'll try to be succinct. The council's aware of this, but there are other members, advocates, who may not be aware of my firm's background, and because of what I'm going to say, I need to be clear about what our values are. We do, as the council's aware, build, own, and manage lower-income, rent-restricted housing in the community, particularly in the downtown core. Almost 270 lower-income people live in those units, including a number of people who have been formerly homeless. We accept Section 8 certificates. We work closely with a variety of other service providers, and my own public policy background on the homeless issue dates back some 27 years. That having been said, and I mean this very respectfully towards contrary opinions, because that's really important to recognize there can be different opinions on these issues. What you're talking about is, as was described, simply expanding the toolbox to accomplish 2 things above all. One is to increase the possibility that services will really be provided to people who are sometimes so compromised through drug abuse or through other issues, including mental illness, that their willingness to deal with those services and accept them is limited. That's one thing. And the second thing is to deal with a very, very small part of the indigent population, which can be both homeless and merely transient, which do create issues. The vast majority of homeless folks don't. We know that. We're talking about small numbers. So police discretion, prosecutorial discretion, it makes sense. It really does. You have a major problem. Now, there was comments earlier about where the public stands. I'm sure the council has no illusions, notwithstanding the volume of comments in this chamber about where the community as a whole stands on this issue. Compassion, intelligence, sensitivity, but also accountability and simply being sensible. I would add a couple other things. Folks in the downtown are prepared to tax themselves to do a number of things dealing with the downtown infrastructure. But part of what they're prepared to do, part of what we're prepared to do, is to tax ourselves to actually provide increased services and liaison with homeless service providers for homeless folks who are in the downtown. The possibility that we would, as a community, win a Proposition 218 vote to do that If for some reason the council chose not to allow the city to proceed ahead in this vein, is unfortunately exactly 0. So I encourage you to move ahead. Thank you very much.
Thomas Ells.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Last time I spoke about it, I said I was really uncomfortable with it and with the direction. And I can only say that first of all, I guess I want to thank everyone who's come here and spoken from their heart, and I'm very moved by that. I don't speak that well that way, but I am moved by that, and I appreciate that, all the things they've said. I want to point out there's 300,000 square feet, 284,000 square feet of buildings empty and available up at Sinead. And 37 and a half square feet, according to Ian DeYoung, who was here, is required per person in a shelter. So they could put about 8,000 people up there. Free. So I'm not sure if people want to solve this problem or not. I think the court has already said that you don't want to solve the problem. Jones versus City of Los Angeles said that the city said there's a necessity defense. So it's not nullification. There is an active defense against the kinds of things that are prosecuted. That active defense is called the necessity defense, that there is no other place for these people to be. And they said that is that the court, the Ninth Circuit of the United States federal court said, for this district, said that the necessity defense was not effective for them, even though that could be a defense. It was that they were being criminalized and harassed merely by the opportunity, if you will, to be arrested or to be the threat of being arrested or to be moved along. So those who were disabled and so on, the people that everyone has talked about, is that they are not allowed to be forced to move along if there's no place for them. And I know that you're trying to solve and put a place for them, but 50 beds is not adequate for what's going to happen to move them into a process which is not yet really set. And I know it's really sad about that. That we should get that set first. But I want to point out one thing, that it is your job to solve some of these problems through the general plan and the housing element, to provide housing and the economic environment that we live in. So this person was very ignorant over here. I don't want to point out anything specific, but it is your job to do that, and it's a very hard job.
Thank you, Mr. Ells.
Thank you.
Last card I have is Rolf Nelson.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Rolf Nelson. I'm a lifelong Santa Rosa resident, and I've worked downtown for the last 20 years. Tonight, I think, has been very educational for a lot of us. I've heard pieces of this challenge that I will leave this room and think more deeply about, as I think that this panel will. However, I don't think that the solution to this is to ignore our laws. We're a society of laws, and there's a reason why we are a society of laws. There's no easy solution to the problems that have been presented tonight. There's no quick solution to the problems that have been submitted tonight, and there's probably no universal solution to the problems that have been presented tonight. We all share in the responsibility for the quality of life for all of our citizens. But as we search for the solutions to the problems that we've heard about tonight, I don't think that we can just turn a blind eye to the impact that they're having on all of our citizens either. So I encourage you to consider tonight's issues carefully, thoughtfully, but as you do it, keep in mind that the laws that are on our books and that you are responsible for enforcing affect more than the people in this room. They affect all the citizens of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone who spoke tonight. That's all the cards I have on this. Before we continue this discussion with questions and comments from the council, Mr. McGlynn, I'd like you to remind the council and the public what it is that staff is asking for tonight.
So staff is, as it was in a study session that happened back in May, staff is proceeding on a pathway to bring this tool back into the toolkit, which is pursuing this particular item. We promised to bring council an update. That's where we're sitting right now, is an update. Next steps in this conversation will be specifically around establishing the relationship with the DA's office, which you see the city attorney has made significant progress on this front, and we will need to bring back at some point, and probably not too far in the future, a memorandum of understanding with the city attorney, with the district attorney around this, and appropriate additional resource that was not appropriated in the budget to move forward this particular program. But at this point, staff is just providing an update. If council needs to give us any other direction, this is the pathway that staff is on at this moment.
Thank you. Council, are there questions at this point? Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. McGlynn. You know, I want to point out some of the highlights that I've seen this council do in the last year since I've been a part of it, that also I think can address some of the questions and comments that people brought forward during their public comment. I heard one gentleman ask about why are we not initiating programs that could potentially help somebody gain an income by helping contribute towards the city. It's my understanding that that is currently underway. We have a chat program that was established that allows any commercial property owner, so business owners out there who want to make a difference, in addition to places zoned for community spaces such as churches and congregations, mosques, etc., can also participate and help us with this problem. We increased funding significantly. It was $832,000 towards this issue a few years ago. It's now $2.4 million, and that includes the low barrier 50-bed shelter expansion. We did a $3 million NOFA, which means Notice of Funding Availability that helps affordable housing developers build. That led to the creation of 2 new permanent supportive housing facilities, or is assumed to. Also I want to thank the staff. One of the big things for me when this came forward back in May was that there is a very comprehensive, thoughtful, and eventually codified progressive discipline approach with alternative rehabilitative sentencing. For me, I'm willing to give our police department and you, Ms. City Attorney, the opportunity to use your discretion. But one of the things that I trust you to use that wisely, but I don't think the public understands or has that same level of trust, which is why the codification of a very enunciated program about how we're going to provide successful diversion programs is key. The other thing too is when we're trying to house people, I can't be okay or sit in this chair and say, yeah, we're trying a housing first approach, but our actions could lead to more people adopting criminal records and fines that prohibit them from having good credit. So again, going forward, please, in my opinion, continue on the path that you're on, but I will be very eager to see this diversion plan in partnership with the district attorney. Short of that, I can't support it. The other thing I want to say too is when I look at some of the quality of life ordinances that we have here, it doesn't sit well with me to know that we are going to potentially levy a misdemeanor fine on somebody who repeatedly parks their car in a certain area when they don't have a place to park with immunity. And I struggle with that as well because I know that that is not necessarily in line with our Housing First strategy. I think it could be adopted to do that if that was our interest, but there really has to be designated spaces in this community for people to park. Otherwise, I don't know what we're achieving. The other one is bathrooms. I haven't had the chance to chime in on this conversation because of CHAP. I was conflicted out potentially earlier. But the other thing too is if we are going to expect people to not use the restroom in a public space, we have to provide a public restroom. And I hope that any plan that comes back includes that. I've spoken with people in this community, actually a very serious donor who was willing to help us with that. I guess we don't have a policy in place to accept private funding sources, but I think that is going to be critically important. And the last thing that I want to add is, can CHAP be expanded to include residential zoning? This is probably a question for Director Gwine, but I met a woman the other day, an 85-year-old woman. She volunteers all over town, and right now she has one of the huts in her residential zone property, so she's violating code. And even though she's breaking the law, part of me applauds her because I see somebody who has an opinion about this issue, but is actually taking action into her own hands to make a difference the best way she knows how to. And so I don't know if it's a possibility or not, and I can have a conversation with you, Director Gwine, offline, not here, to find out if that would be a possibility. So those are my comments. I really thank you guys for the work that you're putting in.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My interest in this conversation is really in making sure that law enforcement has the tools that they need to enforce our laws against those who are being disruptive and inconsiderate of the broader community and not those based on who are homeless. And I think what we're really trying to do right now is strike what ends up being a delicate balance between enforcing and holding some accountability for negative behaviors while also not criminalizing poverty. And it's really, to me, a tricky balance that I have a couple of concerns about. The approach that we're taking, I am concerned a little bit about the impact that this will have on both homeless individuals trying to get into housing and trying to find jobs, as well as our youth as an unintended consequence. This doesn't parse that out at all. I look at this from a number of different, it's a blanket policy where I think we need to be a little bit more nuanced. So when I look at smoking and aggressive panhandling and graffiti and noise and some of those things, those are inappropriate negative behaviors that I think that the community at large is tired of tolerating to a certain extent. But when I look at things like public urination and public defecation, I absolutely agree with my colleagues' comments and voted a couple of weeks ago for porta potties to be placed around the community, and I can't in good conscience make this a misdemeanor for something that we have failed as a council to provide an outlet for on an issue that is human nature, that it's something that everybody has to do. Now, make no mistake, it's absolutely inappropriate for individuals to urinate and defecate in the middle of a business district in front of shops, and I've heard that from a number of shop owners. I actually oftentimes joke that our job as council would be much easier if you passed one law that said, don't be inconsiderate of those around you. And I think that that's part of the problem. I also have a hard time if we are going to turn into a misdemeanor individuals sleeping in a car. So long as it's not being disruptive, I have no idea why we would want to enforce that. I've already made my comments about alcohol and drugs and the diversion program that you talked about. I'm very supportive of, and making sure that people have access to those services as well. I am happy to work with law enforcement and move this forward. but I am very much concerned with the implementation of it as well. And as Jack mentioned, there is concerns about the discretion as well. So what I'd like to see is, we know people aren't going to be able to pay the fine for the most part. Let's come back with a restorative justice program. And in particular, I took note from Mr. Foxworthy, the Quality of Life Crimes Court in San Francisco, if we can look at. I want to strike that balance between providing accountability for the negative behaviors while also giving a remedy for those who are trying to better their life so that they don't have those negative impacts long term that prevent them from getting into housing and getting a job. And my understanding is that we do have that authority under your administrative procedures. So I'm happy to give the police the authority that they need to be able to prevent people from being disruptive, but I also want to find a more nuanced way for us to address this.
Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor Corsi. I'll start by saying I am supportive of the direction that we're going, and I do just want kind of the voyage that led me to this conclusion. Since I've been on council, recognizing those experiencing homelessness is a huge impact in the city. So I've really been spending many hours and talking with a lot of people and understanding the entire service system. And there's no easy solutions there. And even just within the last year and a half, the conversation has come from some that are in the criminal justice system who say the criminal justice system is not the solution to our homeless problem. I absolutely agree, but it is a part of it. And one of the things that, talking with downtown business owners, talking to people who frequent downtown, talking to people who are residents or clients of St. John's Hall, the Palms Inn, a variety of different people, and understanding it is the shared responsibility. And for me, one of the reasons why, I didn't ask the city attorney, but, why do we have city ordinances? Bottom line is, Santa Rosa is 41 square miles, so we have to share the space. And so those are the rules that are going to make it so all of us can share the same space together. If we don't have some rules that actually people are going to abide by, and there's not enforcement for our law enforcement, what's the point of even having them? One of the reasons that I'm very supportive of our police department, I spent a lot of time walking downtown and talking to specifically some of our downtown beat officers. They're not just a gun and a badge, they're actually people behind that. In this Santa Rosa Police Department, I'm very impressed with it. They understand the services that are provided to our homeless and the homeless system. They are not these just hook 'em and book 'em type. They actually build the relationships. I've gone on ride-alongs with the downtown, and they know many of the people experiencing homelessness downtown by name. They've built the relationship. So it's not like someone they don't even know, get out here. They're working on the solution. And that's the big key that I think this policy can help us towards ending some folks' homelessness and not just managing it. And I'll use an example, too, of a recently passed proposition that decriminalized some narcotic-related offenses. There's a thing called drug court that I went to several different of the graduations of. One of the main reasons why people participated in drug court was because the alternative was less desirable than participating in drug court. And hearing successful graduates thanking the judge, thanking the public defender, thanking the DA for getting them there to straighten and clean their life up. They're very thankful. I see some of the same analogies here because I trust the discretion of the Santa Rosa police officers that they will use that discretion accurately. No one at the Santa Rosa Police Department just wants to take someone to jail. In fact, there's laws, 830-something penal code. There's got to be a reason why they would take someone to Sonoma County Jail. Their discretion, I think we hire the brightest, most intelligent people here, and I'm very supportive of their efforts to understand what this council has been talking about, the situation that this entire community, because all these enforcement actions, it's not just focused on downtown, it's the 41 square miles that we call Santa Rosa. So I'm supportive of the direction it's going. I am interested in hearing some updates as to how it's going. Because again, having talked with now people in the Superior Court system, the District Attorney's Office, the Public Defender's Office, the Sheriff's Office, I believe this community is all getting on board. What we're working on is ending homelessness versus just managing it.
Thank you, Ms. Combs.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot to say on this one. We are trying to strike a balance. We're trying to strike a balance between people who don't have a private place to go, who want to use public property, with people who do have a private place to go, but who want the right to use their public spaces. And that's a difficult balance, and that's kind of what we're working on. I would like it if we could discuss pulling out some of these on the list and talking about them separately. I feel very good about enforcement of noise limitations. I have no problems with the enforcement of noise. I think we under-enforce our noise ordinance. I have no problem with the enforcement of weed and rubbish abatement. I think this is obviously very necessary in our easy-to-burn, high-fire risk city. So I hope we will continue to pursue weed and rubbish abatement. Graffiti is a terrible problem in our community, and I hope that we continue to use our officers to abate graffiti. I am having trouble with the regulations that appear to target persons because they are homeless. And especially since we have not made an effort, well, especially since as a council we have not established any public site for persons to sleep. We have not passed sleeping in cars or having safe sleeping sites, and we have not passed even having only one public toilet open overnight in the downtown area. So we've had all of those items turned down by various councils, this council and previous councils. So the idea that we would then increase enforcement of urination and defecation when we won't open one public toilet overnight strikes me as inappropriate. I also have some concerns about what we are doing legally, and I appreciate that we have the city attorney here, and that obviously she is our legal advice. But I do have the press release from August of 2015 from the Justice Department, which says, Justice Department files brief to address the criminalization of homelessness. And it says, quote, "It should be uncontroversial that punishing conduct that is universal and unavoidable consequence of being human violates the Eighth Amendment. Sleeping is a life-sustaining activity. It must occur at some time in some place. If a person literally has nowhere else to go, then enforcement of anti-camping ordinances against that person criminalizes her for being homeless." Now, that's a quote from the Justice Department. That's a big deal to me. It concerns me that I think we're working really hard as a community. As we've gone from 4,000 homeless to 2,000 in the last few years. In our homeless count, we're making good progress. I support our city's interest in moving housing first forward. But I also think that we have, as was stated by one of our commenters, significant gaps in services. Fathers with daughters don't have places to go. Mothers with 12-year-old and up boys have a problem finding places to go. Persons with mental health issues don't have appropriate places to go. People with PTSD, other kinds of disabilities, women who have had domestic violence or rape have no good place to go that keeps them safe and separate at night. Certainly not enough beds. I hope we can establish a relationship with those running the homeless court and that we look into that. I strongly support the suggestion by my colleague that we establish a relationship that would enable us to use restorative resources. I think that's great. I am concerned that we don't know whether or not we are being successful in diverting people now, and if we have funded appropriately diversion programs. One of our commenters mentioned that Housing First has some difficulty with funding diversion, and I think we may want to fund diversion in our Housing First with a twist model. So what I'm hearing is we don't have the total costs. We don't know what effect this is going to have on diverting our police from gang enforcement, other crimes that are more serious, keeping them tied up within the court system. So I'm looking for an analysis of the cost shift effects if we do this. I'm looking for an analysis of the impact of police capacity to protect the public elsewhere. I'm looking for data from us on what happened when we did the minor infractions 3 times and it became a misdemeanor, and who was keeping track of that, and who will keep track of it in the future. I guess I'm very concerned that we're moving forward without sufficient information. Sleep is by necessity. Using a toilet is by necessity. I think we have evidence that local courts and federal courts have said we need to pay attention to what we do by criminalizing things that are done by necessity. I support Mr. Foxworthy's idea of the quality of life crimes court. I think that's an interesting idea and would like to know what San Francisco is doing. I also have a document that indicates that, much to my surprise, panhandling has been determined by a federal level court to be free speech also. That was a surprise to me. So I want to make sure that we aren't doing something that will put us at risk from lawsuit. As I have said before, if you can't be in a private space and you can't be in a public space, where can you be? And I hope that we can find our way to a balance among the needs of our tax-paying homeless residents and our tax-paying house residents by making sure that all of our homeless residents have a safe place where we're doing housing first and doing maintenance. Thank you.
Further comments?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. Well, it's clear that there are some in the chamber this evening that believe that our public safety officials will exercise a high level of discretion, and there are others that are less trusting and that are concerned about that discretion will not be exercised. The very first part of the intended enforcement suggests that they would be dealing with people that have serious violations. That's the very first bullet point. Having been a former business person downtown for about 35 years, I know the challenges both of the merchants, the customers, and also the homeless victims that are now have increased to a point where it is much more obvious to the community. And I think that we are trying to be as thoughtful and compassionate and working very hard as a body to lessen the hardships of homeless in Santa Rosa. And we will not do it all. We can't do it all. We can't be all things to all people. It distresses me that there are not, at this point, porta potties in Santa Rosa. If you were to give me a half a dozen or a dozen of them, or 25 or 30 or 50, I don't even know where I would place them, quite frankly. That would be, but it would be a good problem to have. But that's something for a future discussion. It's not as easy as one might think just to place these facilities around the city. But it is something that we will probably have a conversation about in the future. The second piece of this are the partnerships. And the partnerships are very, very important. We've heard some suggestions of even expanding those partnerships in any way we can take specific courts to deal with specific issues and keep them out of our superior courts, and allow the judges and the county staff to do their important work in other areas, being as creative as possible in how we deal with those that are charged or that are given misdemeanor tickets. But I'm willing to move forward, but especially if I have a fairly high level of trust that our police officers are going to be looking for serious violations, and what I also consider serious violations as repeated violations. But I am also going to be looking, as we move forward, for a pretty extensive and comprehensive report back as to what is the efficacy? What have we accomplished? Are we changing behavior? Are we actually doing what's intended by this enforcement enhancement, which was on the books until it dropped? These are not new. These are not new violations. There's nothing new here. This is not targeted to any one group. These have been around for years, but this is they were dropped, or the seriousness was changed, and this is we're talking about a decision to up the level of seriousness, and some of these are easier to swallow than others. But I'm willing to give it a shot. But I will be looking for a pretty comprehensive report back to this body as soon as that information is available.
Mr. Oliveris.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be brief, and thank you, John, for summarizing some of those intended enforcement points that were made, because I was looking at those as well. First of all, I want to say that the presentation was a response to city code violations, and I noticed that the homeless piece was barely mentioned there, but that's what we're talking about here today. But I think to better understand where we are, we need to put things in perspective as far as how we got here, because we have been dealing with our homeless population for a long time, at least in the 38 years that I've been here. But never in my time that I've been here have I seen so much progress, so much coordinated effort in addressing this issue as I have in the past 3 years. And that is remarkable to see that happening. We're seeing more collaboration, more communication in trying to address the issues, which is very important. We're seeing a big focus on prevention and helping people to retain what they have as far as housing. And of course, we are looking to ensure that we find a path to getting people into permanent housing as well. I am in favor of giving our law enforcement officials the authority that they need to use a tool. And again, it's a tool, but I think tonight we kind of summarize this tool as almost being the hammer. And I think we all know what happens if that's the only tool that you have in your toolbox. But I think I see this as a tool that that may not have to be used as often. But I think when we start talking about our efforts in providing services, the topic of accountability does come up, and it has to come up. And in reality, and I think in my work, we are really talking about a small percentage of the population out there that we're needing to deal with accountability. But in giving the authority to move forward and establishing some kind of a process to make this happen, I think it's also important to look at a method of tracking the implementation. It's not that we're flipping a switch one night and suddenly we're doing things differently. As Councilmember Sawyer pointed out, in looking at the intended enforcement actions and looking at where is it appropriate. Again, it's a tool that may not be appropriate in all situations. Looking at the seriousness of the offenses, repeat violations, and also recognizing that it is not just our homeless population that is causing some of these problems in our downtown either. I have seen it firsthand that it is not just our homeless population. But also just as we've been tracking, as we've been moving forward in new directions in addressing our homeless issues, obviously we're tracking the number of homeless during our counts. We're also now tracking the number of homeless that we're putting into permanent housing. So as we move down this path, I think it'll be important for us to track the effort of this new tool and how we're using it. It's to the extent possible to be as transparent as we can in identifying, because one of the things we don't know is the types of offenses, what are the most common. So I would hope that we find a way of measuring what kind of offenses are the most frequent type of offenses that we're dealing with. Over time, getting information on what types of convictions are resulting out of this. Numbers of repeat offenders. But I also know that it is not just a tool that is being used to address a problem, whether it's noise or urination. It's a point of contact typically with our homeless population where I know there's an offer for services. I know there's an exchange beyond the violation. I think that'll be important as well, is to ensure that during that conversation we're assessing it and also making those referrals where appropriate to ensure that we're getting our folks into actually making the connection that they need to get into the process of our Housing First models and to access the housing that they need. So I'll leave it at that, but again, I want to give the authority, but I also want to ensure that we have a method of tracking what we're doing, that we're measuring. We have some kind of a matrix to assess it, and that we're nimble enough to make changes where needed. And again, I also I will repeat the issue related to diversion. What kinds of options do we have so that we all know what is available and that we're using them appropriately and when needed? Because there's different ways to use our tools, and I think we need to find ways of making them effective and use them wisely towards that end result of helping those people that we need to help in our community. Thank you.
Shame on you.
So there's not a whole lot that hasn't been said, but there's a couple things that I want to repeat just to underline. First of all, it's disappointing to me that so much of the conversation about this item in front of us tonight has taken place as if this were the only thing that we're doing to try to address homelessness in this community. And it's not. This is a small part of what we're doing. And I'm glad it was mentioned that over the past 3 years, we've tripled the resources, the financial resources that we're putting towards solving this problem. We will spend $2.5 million this year in addressing it. This is a tiny part, and it's a tool. You know, the effort that this council is making is to try to put homeless people into housing, not to try to put homeless people into jail. And I don't expect this tool to be used that way. I expect it to be used with discretion. I expect it to be used sparingly. And I want to repeat what's been said by several council members up here, that I think that we need a report back to us every 3 or 4 months on how it's being used. Because if it's not being used with discretion and if it's not being used sparingly, I'm going to have a problem with that. I hope that we will support the diversion efforts such as the homeless court, or if you want to call it a quality of life court, whatever it's called. I think that we need to support something like that. I'd also like to look at other diversion possibilities. I don't want to fine people for being homeless. If they run into a problem with these ordinances, I'd like to have alternative ways for them to deal with it. And possibly that would be the host teams that go out and clean up homeless camps or other areas of the city that need that kind of work. But availability of options rather than going into debt to deal with the problems. So those are just the things I wanted to highlight from what's been said here tonight. I haven't heard any consensus from the council to change your direction, so we're going to go down this path and see how it works. I thank everybody for your participation tonight and for your courtesy, and we were happy to listen to everyone speak their minds. Going to move on to the next item.
Shame on you.
Thank you very much. 15.1.
Item 15.1, public hearing, Santa Rosa Fire Department Annual Weed Abatement Program Report confirmation. Paul Lowenthal, Assistant Fire Marshal, presenting.
Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame. Thank you, Mrs.
Listen to the public when you already made up your mind.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Paul Lowenthal, Assistant Fire Marshal with the Santa Rosa Fire Department with Fire Marshal Scott Moon. Tonight is the public hearing related to our weed abatement program. This is an opportunity for the public to voice any objections or concerns regarding any penalties that have been associated with either the abatement of private properties and or the enforcement actions against non-compliant properties. This is an annual program, and we ask that following any objections from the public, the council approve by resolution the itemized list that will be forwarded onto the county for unpaid fees associated with the abatement to the county. On a side note, we did have a pretty substantial fire this afternoon that occurred off of Tuxhorn that required a significant response from the Santa Rosa Fire Department, Rankin Valley, and CAL FIRE. Happy to say that that was actually a property that had some pretty good breaks cut in it. So the fire essentially moved pretty well through about 6.5 acres of grass and hit about a 100-foot break that prevented it from impacting all the homes along Hearn Avenue. So that was a good success story. So with that.
All right, this is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Anyone who would like to speak to this item, you don't need to fill out a card, just approach a microphone. I'll be happy to hear. Seeing no one rise to speak to this item, I'll close the public hearing. Council, are there any questions for staff on this? All right, Ms. Combs, you have it.
I have this item, thank you. Resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa confirming the itemized report of the Santa Rosa Fire Department of the cost of removing weeds and or rubbish from, upon, or in front of certain lots or parcels of land within the City of Santa Rosa, and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Council, your votes. And that has 7 ayes. Thank you. Thank you. 15.2.
Item 15.2, public hearing on placement of annual stormwater enterprise charges on the Sonoma County property tax rolls unless those charges do not meet the county minimum of $10 and or parcel owner contact information is known to be incorrect. Heaven Moore, Supervising Engineer, presenting.
Good evening. Good evening. So this item is a annual item. Oh,
we need to move you to the.
That's okay. Different topic. Yes. Okay. I won't repeat the long title. So what this is, every year we come back to you to discuss the stormwater assessment. The enterprise charges were set up in accordance with the Title 16 requirements of the City Code in 1996. They provide funding for the city's NPDES stormwater permit, as well as activities such as creek restoration and stewardship, flood protection, public education, storm drain maintenance, and stormwater quality testing. The calculation of the assessment is based on an equivalent residential unit that considers the size of the property, the amount of impervious surface on that property, and the land use code. The current rate is $32.56 for an ERU, which was approved as part of the budget process. In order to simplify the payment process, we bring this item forward to have these charges collected on the county tax roll in the same manner and method and timing as the other county taxes. They've been collected in this manner since September of '96. It is in the best interest of the city for those parcels that don't meet the county's minimum requirements of being $10 or less, for those charges to not be separately billed by the city. The cost to do separate billing for those parcels exceeds the potential revenue we could collect. And it would be, by not including them, we're being consistent with the county's practice. And any charges like this that would not be collected would not change anyone else's charges. Each formula is distinct to the particular parcel. So today's public hearing is consistent with the required code. And gives what we're bringing forward is the request to place these charges on the county tax roll, not the charges themselves, but the placement of them on the tax roll for collection. So it is recommended by the Water Department that the council by resolution adopt the Stormwater Enterprise Charge Report and approve placement of the Stormwater Enterprise charges on the Sonoma County tax roll to be collected by the Sonoma County Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector at the same time and in the same manner as the Sonoma County property taxes are collected, unless those charges do not meet the county's minimum of $10 and/or the parcel owner contact information is known to be incorrect. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, council? This is a public hearing. I'll open the hearing. Anyone in the chamber wish to speak to the council on this subject? Seeing no one rise, I'll close the public hearing. And Mr. Schwedhelm has this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa approving and adopting report for a proposal to place stormwater and drainage charges on Sonoma County property tax roll for collection with county property taxes fiscal year 2017-18 and ordering that the city's annual stormwater enterprise charges be collected on the Sonoma County property tax roll unless those charges do not meet the county minimum of $10 and/or parcel owner contact information is known to be incorrect, and waive further reading of the text.
Second. Council, your votes. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. McGlynn, written communications.
Item 16.1, Quarterly Capital Improvement Program Projects Update, April to June 2017, provided for information. 16.2, Final Map Mission Village Subdivision, provided for information. Item 16.3, Final Map The Meadows at Taylor Mountain Subdivision, provided for information.
Thank you, Mr. McGlynn. Brings us to our final public comment session. Is Merlin in the house? All right, then we are adjourned.